Chapter 592. General Emo, you don't have to hide anymore. Stand out. Arriving in front of the captured ministers, Skylark had a smile on his face as he pointed at Emoda, who was squeezing into the crowd with his head lowered. When his name was called out, Tu Longfeng immediately grabbed him and pressed him in front of Skylark. What are you doing? I surrender. I surrender. In the future, I am willing to be a loyal and courageous duke. I am willing to be a mercenary's dog. Please don't kill me. The weakness of human nature was finally exposed. Originally, he still dared to shout a few words in front of the Imperial advisor, but the moment he saw the mercenaries, he was completely terrified. Skylark naturally wouldn't put this kind of person who bullied the weak and feared the strong in his eyes. As for the other party saying that he wanted to be a loyal and courageous duke's dog, he was very sorry, but such a person didn't have the qualifications. All right, you don't have to shout. Whether you can survive or not depends on how much you are willing to pay. We have also investigated your family background. How about this? In 3 days, take out 400,000 taels of silver and you can live. Otherwise, you will die. The survey showed that Emoda's private property was about 350,000 taels of silver. The extra 50,000 taels was what Skylark meant. How could you know what kind of potential some people had if you didn't squeeze it out? What? 400,000 taels? I don't have it. When he heard this number, Emoda shook his head vigorously. No one knew better than him how much money he had. He definitely doesn't have 400,000 taels of silver. No? Could it be that our intelligence was wrong? Skylark said in a surprised voice. If one understood his subordinates, they would definitely know that the leader was preparing to scam them. How could Emoda know about this? He just wanted to bleed less, so he cooperated and said, Yes, your intelligence must be wrong. I can only take out 10,000 taels of silver at most. This is already my family background. When he shouted for Doe-E to cry out for injustice, those who didn't know would really think that Emoda only had this much money and was a great honest official. Bam! A kick suddenly landed on Emoda's body. We were wrong. How could we be wrong? It's obvious that you have the money but don't want it. All right, since you're willing to give up your life for money, I'll fulfill your wish. Men, chop off one of his arms as a warning. If he still doesn't repent, then his limbs. No. After all of his limbs are broken, kill him, and then go to his residence to search and confiscate his property. Skylark seemed to smile at everyone he met, but he was actually very vicious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been entrusted with such a heavy responsibility by the Security Bureau. She couldn't be too soft-hearted when doing this kind of work. As soon as he finished speaking, Long Feng took out a steel saber and landed it on Emoda's left arm. The blade rose and fell, accompanied by the sound of Maud's shouting. Ouch! It hurts so much. Come, let me ask you, do you have 400,000 taels? Skylark ignored the other party's shouts and continued to ask. No, at most 200,000 taels. Emoda was still insisting. He believed that the other party wanted money and not his life, so he gritted his teeth and persevered. He wanted to save some money for himself. You're still not honest. Cut off your left leg as well. Skylark didn't have the slightest intention of wasting his breath. He had already decided to kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. He wanted the other ministers to see what would happen if they wanted money and not their lives. Shwa. His left leg was chopped off as well. Another blood-curdling scream rang out. At this moment, Emoda struggled in pain twice before fainting. He fainted. Yeah, maybe this is the best outcome. The other Lansong ministers squatted on the ground and watched this scene. They didn't forget to discuss it in private. In their eyes, it was better for Emoda to faint than to be awake. After all, he still had to suffer even if he was awake. Fainted? Hee. Do you think you'll be fine like this? Someone, wake him up with cold water. Either take the money or give up your life. You have to choose one. Skylark chuckled and casually instructed. A bucket of cold water was poured down on Emoda's head, and he woke up. When he looked at Skylark, it was as if he was looking at a devil. He repeatedly shouted, I have 400,000 taels. I can borrow it. Sigh. Is that right? Someone, stop General Mo's bleeding. We can't let him die before we get the money. Skylark chuckled. as if he was very satisfied. Then, he drew a line with the brush in his hand, then looked at the Lan Song Kingdom's ministers who were squatting on the ground and casually said, "Come, next, Lord Xin Yuliang, who is in charge of the treasury." Plop. As soon as he finished speaking, one of the people in the crowd fell to the ground in fright. Who else could it be but Xin Yuliang? But no matter how he reacted, he couldn't escape the result of being brought to Skylark for questioning. If one wanted to know what the result was, they would naturally have to pay for their lives. Otherwise, Emoda's fate would be right in front of them. They didn't want to lower their heads after being cut a few times. That would just be looking for trouble. State Preceptor Long Chi saw this scene with his eyes. Cold sweat unknowingly flowed down the back of his neck. At this moment, he was very glad. He was glad that Skylark didn't look for anyone else but himself. He was glad that he tactfully agreed to the other party's request. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would have lost both his life and money. The heart-to-heart talk, or rather, the interrogation, continued. After questioning one person, Tu Longfeng accompanied him and left. 3 days later, these people would either take out the money or pay with their lives. Under the pressure, who would think about the transfer of power? Who would care about the life and death of the king? This also made the following process very smooth. That night, the 3 battalions separately attacked the Lan Song Kingdom's treasury, armory, and granary. Early the next morning, the gunshots in the city finally stopped. Some brave citizens walked out of their houses and found that everything was very peaceful. There wasn't any difference from before. If there was a difference, it would be that on the streets, one could hear the sounds of cursing coming from an official's residence. Also, one could see soldiers in green military uniforms patrolling the streets with the king's guards. With the experience of taking down Hanei City, it wasn't so complicated to deal with Wanxiang City. First, confiscate the property, then stabilize the situation. After that, all they had to do was wait for the 6th young master to bring the knowledgeable youths from Qiqian City to take over this place. King Paisai was placed under house arrest in a small courtyard. His food and drink were all sent to him. He had completely lost his freedom. Originally, the king still had a glimmer of hope. When the sun rose, he thought that there would be some loyal subjects coming to save him. However, after waiting from morning till night, there was no movement at all. He knew that he, the king, had been abandoned by his subjects. How would he know that all the subjects were now raising money to buy their own lives? How would they have the time to care about the lives of others? Even if he was the king, he was also thrown to the back of their minds. The occupied granaries started to sell rice. Once the people had something to eat, they became very obedient. The situation in the city stabilized. 3 days later, some of the subjects handed over the ransom. In order to survive, they really used all kinds of methods. Apart from the houses that Long Feng had told them to confiscate, they sold everything else that they could. Some of them even sold their own concubines just to save up enough money to survive. Fortunately, those who could become subjects often had the support of some people behind them. It wasn't too difficult to borrow money from them. Therefore, more than 80% of the subjects handed over enough money in the stipulated time and didn't have to worry about their lives. Of course, there were also 20% who didn't have that much money. Yunk naturally wouldn't be polite. Since he said it, he had to do it. Otherwise, how could he intimidate others? Immediately, those people had their limbs chopped off and were hung on the city gate tower. This scene made many of the subjects feel that it was a close call. 3 days later, Yunk had an extra 14 million taels of silver in his hands. Most of this was provided by the subjects. A small amount was obtained from the Lan Song Kingdom's treasury. From this point, it could be seen that any country had some foundation. A small Wanxiang city could squeeze out 10 million taels of silver. What if it was the entire Lan Song Kingdom? What if the target was the Great Ming Dynasty? Just like the end of the Great Ming Dynasty, there was no money in the treasury. All the money was in the hands of the subjects and merchants. This caused the country to have no money to raise an army. In the end, it was destroyed by slave Jian. Then, in order to save their lives, the subjects and merchants took out an unknown amount of gold and silver to give to slave Jian. This also caused Emperor Chongzhen, who knew all of this, to shout before he died, "Kill all the subjects." Now that he thought about it, it did make some sense. On the 5th day, the main force of the mercenary army finally arrived at Wanxiang City. Accompanying them were 50,000 young men who had long been prepared. They would use their knowledge to infect everyone around them so that they could become a member of the Yang family as soon as possible. In the Lansong Kingdom's palace, Yang Chendong summoned Captain Wu Shang, Yunk, and the others. After listening to their reports, he nodded his head in satisfaction and praised them. After Yunk reported that they obtained 14 million taels of silver, Yang Chendong laughed out loud. See, wealth comes so quickly in war. Hee. Since that is the case, we still need 3 million taels of silver from Long Qi. Just give it to him. As for the remaining 1 million taels, take out 200,000 taels to reward the Laotian mercenaries in River Light and 800,000 taels to reward the subjects who contributed greatly in this war. 10 million taels of silver will go into the treasury and be used to build the infrastructure of Lao province. Great. Yang Chendong had already thought of changing the Lansong Kingdom to Lao province. After Vietnam, the Yang family had another province, and it was not considered small. Everyone naturally agreed in unison. However, it was obvious that the second Captain Luo Pe and the third Captain Wu Sheng were a little distracted, as if they had something to say. Yang Chendong sat high up, so he naturally could see more clearly. He called out, "Captain Luo, Captain Wu, do you have something to say?" Chapter 593. Sixth Young Master. Now that the Lansong Kingdom has been destroyed, who are we going to destroy next? The two commanders asked excitedly. It was obvious that they were addicted to the war. Ha, it depends on the situation. Oh right, is there any news about Fan Yuhai from the Security Bureau? Yang Chendong laughed. He liked the morale of his subordinates. However, food had to be taken one bite at a time. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to finish the second bite, they would also vomit the first bite. Yunk, who had been prepared for this question, replied respectfully, "Sixth Young Master, there is information that after Fan Yuhai was defeated in Sangnu City, he took 5,000 elite cavalry to Siam. Siam was a title given by the Ming dynasty. They called themselves the Ming dynasty, which was the current Thailand. Oh haha, this Fan Yuhai knows what I want to do. Sigh, I can't bear to kill such a person." Yang Chendong couldn't help but smile. This person seemed to be afraid that he didn't have enough territory and could always find a new enemy for the mercenaries to conquer. There was an excuse again. Yang Chendong was all smiles. Then arrange for someone to go to Siam and ask them to hand over Fan Yuhai. Otherwise, they will have to bear the consequences. During this time, we have to divide the land among the rich and stabilize the situation in Lao province. We have to speed up the communication between Lao province and Vietnam so that they can communicate with each other. The mercenaries shouldn't be idle either. Eliminate the opposing forces in Lao province as soon as possible. In short, before we attack other countries, we have to stabilize this place. If we don't achieve this goal, the 2nd and 3rd regiments won't participate in the next war. Please be at ease, Sixth Young Master. We will definitely resolve the problem here in the shortest time possible. Luo Pe and Wu Sheng replied with an anxious look on their faces when they heard this. Following the 6th Young Master meant that they could fight wars, eat meat, and be promoted quickly. Right now, it was just that the requirements for Long Feng's assessment were a little too high. Once they had enough soldiers, they would most likely have the qualifications to become division commanders. If they were really forced to stay here because of the security issues in Laos, wouldn't they miss out on a great opportunity? This was something they absolutely could not allow to happen. Crimson City. More than 4 million Han Chinese had settled down here, and the entire Ryukyu Island had been unified. The development of the entire island also began to speed up, especially Crimson City, which was the center of political, cultural, economic, and scientific development. It was a scene of prosperity. With Yang Chendong's approval, Chichen City had nearly doubled in size. In terms of size, it was almost half the size of Beiming's capital, but it was still barely enough to supply the merchants and trade routes of the entire country. As a result, many factories began to expand at a faster pace. Whether it was the factories or the workers, they were increasing exponentially. Wan Xiaoqin, as an outstanding political teacher, had a lot of work to do. With so many new people joining, whether it was ideological work or teaching them how to read and write, He was so busy that he felt like he did not have enough time. However, he did not complain at all. Instead, he worked tirelessly. In the words of his parents and sister, he was still young, so there was nothing wrong with working and learning more. Otherwise, when he was old, he would not have so much energy to learn. Even though he could only sleep about 6 hours a day because of how busy he was, Wan Xiaoqian did not slack off at all. This was because he knew how much attention the Wan family had attracted, and many people were jealous of them. His father, Wan Qi, was the factory manager of the power plant. His mother, Zhou Hua, was the director of the main garment factory. Just the workers in the few factories under her command added up to more than 100,000 people. One could imagine how much power she had. However, they could not compare to his sister, Wan Xiaoyu. At that time, she was the head of Crimson City's propaganda department. Whenever she had free time, she would go to the palace that everyone in Crimson City admired to accompany the sixth young master's 3 wives. Sometimes, she would even spend the night there. There was news that when Wan Xiaoyu turned 18, she would become the new wife of the sixth young master. The wife of the sixth young master, how noble was that? Just based on this, the Luan family did not need to do anything and could still eat and drink well. It was also because of Luan Xiaoyu's existence that even City Lord Yu Qian and the 2 military commanders, Leng Song and Gao Xiong, would be very polite when they met the Luan family. Because of this, although some people were envious, they did not dare to do anything jealous. Under this kind of pressure, Wan Xiaoqian's efforts seemed so ordinary. It seemed that everyone thought that this person could have his current position. Not long ago, Yang Qindong personally promoted him from a battalion-level instructor to a deputy regiment-level political commissar. That was not the result of his own efforts, but because of his sister, Wan Xiaoyu. However, this could not dispel his passion for work and private efforts. Under the strong pressure, Wan Xiaoqian just went to the unit in the morning. He was about to bring people to do political work for the new citizens when someone came to his office. As soon as this person entered the political department building, the whole atmosphere changed. Many people, who were originally in a rush, walked a little slower. Then, their constant greetings resounded in the corridor. Fifth brother, hello, everyone. The person also smiled and greeted everyone politely. Then, he came to Wan Xiaoqian's office. At this moment, Wan Xiaoqian was assigning today's tasks to several subordinates. Because his back was facing the door, he didn't see anyone coming behind him. He was still arranging some things by himself. It wasn't until he noticed that his subordinates were looking behind him that he realized something was wrong. He turned around to look. When he turned around, he saw Yang Wu standing in the corridor. He immediately smiled and said, "Fifth brother is here." Fifth brother was Yang Wu. He was one of Yang Qindong's most trusted servants. He was also his trusted aide in Qiqian City. Normally, he was in charge of the safety of the 3 madams. However, he secretly had the authority to investigate all the officials and military officers. After all, Yang Qindong was not in Qiqian City most of the time. This was his headquarters, and he could not afford to lose it. Yang Wu's status was somewhat aloof, so much so that if he found out there was a problem, he had the authority to act first and report later. In terms of the effectiveness of dealing with officials, even Yu Qian, Long Song, and Gao Xiong couldn't compare. In principle, he could even investigate the 3 of them. Of course, the 3 of them also had the authority to monitor Yang Wu. This was mutual supervision. With his aloof status, Yang Wu became the most popular person in Qiqian City. No matter where he appeared, he would naturally cause a storm. Many times, following his appearance, who knew how many corrupt officials would fall off their horses? Of course, they came to see Wan Xiaoqian today not to investigate him. This was something that everyone had reached a consensus on. What a joke. His sister was the future wife of the 6th young master. That meant that she would be Yang Wu's future mistress. No matter how bold he was, he would not dare to touch the mistress's brother without asking for permission. "Xiaoqian, don't be busy. The young master has given an order," Yang Wu said with a smile on his face. He had a good impression of Wan Xiaoqian. He clearly had the qualifications to be a silk pants, but he did things with propriety. He would not do things that should not be done by him. If everyone was like this, his job would be much easier. "The young master has given an order," Since it was the young master that Yang Wu spoke of, only Yang Chendong could take on the responsibility. Knowing this, Luan Shaoqian became a lot more serious. He stood at attention, puffed out his chest and raised his head, waiting for the order to be given. Yang Wu also became a lot more serious. He opened his mouth and said, "The young master has given an order. From today onwards, Luan Shaoqian will be the governor of Lao province. Immediately hand over the work in your hands. 3 days later, you will take the ship to take up the post." 1452 AD, 3rd month, 20th day. After saying this with a serious face, Yang Wu's smile returned to his face. "Congratulations, Shaoqian." Luan Shaoqian was still in shock and had not recovered. How did he become the governor of a province? And what did Lao province mean? Why hadn't he heard of it before? Seeing that Luan Shaoqian was still in shock, Yang Wu seemed to know what he was thinking. He smiled and explained, "Lao province is the Lansong kingdom. The young master had just led his troops to conquer it. In the future, it will be one of our provinces, just like Yunnan province. There are a lot of things waiting to be done. There will be room for you, Shaoqian, to perform." The news of the Lansong kingdom's destruction had not been officially announced. Many people did not know. Now that it was announced by Yang Wu, naturally no one would doubt it. However, it still caused a huge uproar. It had been less than 2 months since the 6th young master left Qiqian city, and he actually destroyed another country. Their 6th young master was really powerful. The voices of other people were still ringing in his ears. Luan Shaoqian was already shocked by this appointment. Although it could be said that the political department had become a behemoth like the military, especially the political assessment of officers and soldiers, this department's power had become more and more powerful. However, there were also a lot of talents here. It was too difficult to stand out here, and it was even more difficult to achieve results. However, if he could go to Laos to be the governor, it would be completely different. One must know that Laos was an independent place, and it was a newly conquered place. Although everything had to be started from scratch, this was the value of it. It was like a blank piece of paper, and it was easier to create beautiful scenery. It was not an exaggeration to say that once there was such an opportunity, most people would fight to the death. There was a saying that one would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. Unfortunately, he only had a lot of ambition, and there was no room for him to display his talent. After all, there was only Yunnan province before. That place had already been occupied, and people had lost hope. Now that Laos had just been conquered, the 6th young master's order was given. The intention of training was very obvious. How could Luan Shaoqian, who was originally smart, not understand the reason behind it? Chapter 594. Congrats, congrats. While his mind was still filled with shock and excitement from this new information, he heard a familiar voice. Mo Chengyu and Ji Fei had appeared in front of him at some point. These two were members of the political department. Mo Chengyu was also the political commissar of the 1st Division of Langfeng, while Ji Fei was the political commissar of the 1st Division of the Navy. Both of them were people of high status and power. They were in the same office today. When they heard that Yang Wu was here, they came out of courtesy and heard the order. They immediately understood that the 6th young master was here to help his brother-in-law. The two of them immediately came out to congratulate him. Committee member Mo, committee member Ji. Looking at the two, Luan Shaoqian habitually saluted them. Haha, good. After all, Shaoqian is still a member of the political department. Now that you have made a name for yourself, you are the glory of our department. Tonight, committee member Ji and I will hold a farewell banquet for you. You must come. Mo Chengyu laughed and used this opportunity to improve his relationship with Luan Shaoqian. Although he was the number 1 committee member in the department, in reality, he was not much different from the other 3 committee members. If he wanted to have real power, he would have to become a vice minister. If he wanted to achieve this goal, he would need more people to support him. If Luan Shaoqian was willing to support him at the critical moment, it would be a great help. TL note: Yang Chenong is the minister of the Ministry of Defense. Yes, we're representing the department. Shaoqian won't refuse, right? Ji Fei obviously understood the reason behind it and said with a smile. The 6th young master only gave him 3 days. If he did not make the first move, then he would not have a chance to improve their relationship. Facing the enthusiasm of the two superiors, Luan Shaoqin could not refuse. He could only look at Yang Wu, who had come to deliver the order. When Yang Wu came, he was not only following the young master's order, he was also following the orders of the three matriarchs. Naturally, he had to take care of Luan Shaoqin. He nodded and said, "Since it is the department's good intentions, Shaoqin should not refuse." "All right, tomorrow night, the three matriarchs and department head Luan will be holding a farewell banquet for Little Li. Don't miss the appointment." Naturally, Yang Wu was expressing his attitude. Tomorrow's meeting had already been decided, so other people should not have any ideas. This was also for Luan Shaoqin's sake. As for why he allowed Luan Shaoqin to get closer to Mo Qingyu and Jiguang, it was to get more support from them. This time, Luan Shaoqin was not going to Laos alone. He was going with 50,000 educated youths from Kikian City. How good these people were, and whether they could bring some elites with them, were under the jurisdiction of the political department. It was the best of both worlds to decide on the personnel by building a good relationship with them. "Okay, I'll listen to fifth brother." Luan Shaoqin smiled. Obviously, he already understood the other party's intention. If Luan Shaoqin didn't have the strength, why would Yang Chundong vigorously promote him? One had to know that Luan Shaoqin had just celebrated his 18th birthday. At such a young age, he was already the head of a province, a high-ranking official of a region. This was probably very rare in history. This news was also immediately sent to department head Luan Xiaoyu's ears. Hearing the news from her trusted aide, Luan Xiaoyu's face was full of pride. In her mind, the image of her big brother who hugged her the first time they met appeared. Now, she only hoped that she could grow up quickly and use her life to repay this benefactor of the Luan family. Luan Shaoqin's matter became a hot topic in Kikian City. At the same time, it gave more youths hope. Since Luan Shaoqin, who had just turned 18, could become a high-ranking official, did that not mean that they also had hope? Although he had benefited from his sister's light, his youth was still a fact. This made many youths work even harder. Everyone hoped that good luck would fall on them in the future. In fact, everyone had forgotten that Yang Qindong's true age was only 22 years old. It was just that his achievements were too dazzling, to the point that everyone had chosen to forget about it. Luan Shaoqin did not disappoint, using the banquet that night to recruit many elites. This would be a huge help to him in the future. With Yang Wu's appearance, the others did not have the chance to disturb Luan Shaoqin. Instead, they allowed him to spend more time with his family. After all, outside Kikian City was the outside world. As the head of a province, he could not leave without orders. Who knew when the next meeting would be? 3 days later, Luan Shaoqin set off on time. Along with him were 50,000 youths, as well as 2 auxiliary battalions that had just passed the background check and training. As the population of Kikian City increased, the number of militia also increased. According to the rules, once the militia had served for over half a year and passed the background check, they would be able to join the auxiliary army. This was also due to the change in the situation. After all, the more places they conquered, the more soldiers they would need. Of course, more did not mean less. The examination was still very strict, especially the background check. Who knew how many people were rejected? After all, once they left Kikian City, if these people did not keep their mouths shut and spread the news, who knew what kind of problems it would cause? On this point, the political department played a huge role, and the publicity department also put in a lot of effort. In their programs, they had already treated Yang Qindong as a god. This was how the title of God Young Master came about. It was also because the background check was very strict that no one knew about the situation in Kikian City. Even the great Ming dynasty did not know who the real leader of the mercenaries was. Thinking about it, so many people had left Kikian City in the past year, but there was no news at all. It had to be said that this was a miracle. In Lao Province, Luan Shaoqin arrived on time. As soon as he entered, he was taken away by the first security team to see Yang Qindong. Afterwards, the 6th young master gave many constructive suggestions on how to manage this place. After the siege of Hanoi City in Vietnamese province, Yang Qindong did not want such a thing to happen again. As such, his requirements for Luan Shaoqin were that the foundation had to be firm, the people's livelihood had to be improved, the military had to be strong, and the economy had to be prosperous. The foundation had to be firm. There were 2 main aspects. The first was the hearts of the people. They could not let the people have any negative feelings towards them. The second was the infrastructure. Whether it was building houses or repairing cement roads, they had to be stable and fast. On this point, Kikian City would provide support in terms of manpower, resources, and money. The people's livelihood had to be improved. There were also two aspects. The first was to build trenches and distribute farmland. As long as the people had farmland and a place to live, they would become obedient and cooperate. Of course, those landlords and rich gentry who did not cooperate would be captured and sent to Kikian City for reform. That place was surrounded by the sea, and it was a good place to turn over a new leaf. The second was the taxes of the people. If the taxes were high, the income of the people would decrease, and it would affect their lives. How to increase the income of the people while increasing their income at the same time? For example, they could be hired to repair roads and houses. With work, the people would have money, and their hearts would be stable. The military had to be strong. This referred to the militia system in Kikian City. It was not that everyone was a soldier, but at the very least, the young men had to serve in the militia. With military skills, once something happened, they would not have to worry about mobilizing soldiers. In order to make everyone more motivated, they could reduce the militia's taxes. For example, if a family had a militia and they performed well, they could reduce their taxes by a certain amount. In this way, they wouldn't have to worry about not having enough soldiers. The economy had to be prosperous. This referred to the need to liven up business. Just like Hanoi City in Vietnam, they had to create a commercial street and slowly expand it. In the end, it would lead all the businesses in the vicinity to have a commercial street in every city. As the saying went, without commerce, there would be no rich country, and this was the principle. Under Yang Qindong's careful guidance, Luan Shaoqian memorized the instructions in the book, which gave him a general understanding of the work in the future. Next, he only needed to do it one by one. When a problem appeared, he would solve it one by one. His experience would become better and better, and his ability would become stronger and stronger. After recording these problems, Luan Shaoqian asked a more daring question. That was, should the expansion continue? Of course, he was not against expansion. Under the ideological and political education, the people from Kikian City knew that Yang Qindong had to send out troops to destroy one country after another in order to save more people. However, continuous expansion would also bring some hidden dangers. For example, the instability of the rear. If this problem could not be solved, once a problem occurred, it would be a big problem. It meant that many people who had just seen hope would once again fall into endless war and return to a life of poverty. This was not what Yang Qindong wanted. Luan Shaoqian thought about it all the way on the ship before asking this question. He didn't even know if he would incur Yang Qindong's wrath after saying this. But since Yang Qindong trusted him so much, he had to say whatever was in his heart. This was what it meant to repay a debt of gratitude. Haha. To Luan Shaoqian's surprise, Yang Qindong was not angry. Instead, he laughed and said, I know what you are thinking. Don't worry, without a stable foundation, there will not be too much expansion for the time being. Of course, if you want to liberate more people with this young master and let more people live a better life, then you should build up Laos as soon as possible. Chapter 595. After saying this, Yang Qindong patted Luan Shaoqian's shoulder. How could he not know that a weak foundation had become the biggest obstacle to expansion? Just like what Luan Shaoqian was worried about. If the rear wasn't stable and the front was still fighting, the consequences would be unimaginable. Regarding this, he naturally knew. Even without Luan Shaoqian's reminder, he had to stabilize and build a foundation first. Of course, if possible, he would fight 2 more battles to serve as a deterrent, so that he could gain more time and space for development. But he would not tell Luan Shaoqian all of this for the time being. In fact, there was still a problem involved in the assessment. Yang Qindong stopped for more than a month. He had to wait for the Security Bureau to send the latest news about Fan Yuhai. He had to wait for Long Feng and the auxiliary soldiers to completely pacify Laos with the cooperation of General He Guang. During this time, the news of Lansong Kingdom being taken down by the mercenaries finally passed through the rainforest and reached Ming, Southern Ming, and King Min's factions. Among the 3 factions, the one with the biggest reaction was the Emperor of Southern Ming, Zhu Qizhan. Ming was far away and couldn't take care of it. Even if they were angry, they could only choose to ignore it. King Min was still consolidating his position. Learning from Southern Ming, he was also recruiting and training soldiers. However, he couldn't stop Yang Chendong from growing stronger. Southern Ming was different. This country originally belonged to Zhu Qizhan. In his opinion, whether it was Bai Ming's Zhu Qiyu or King Min's Zhu Huaituan, they were all his family's thieves. They were the ones who stole his wealth and territory. However, no matter what, their fight was his family's business and the mercenaries were his enemies. With such a mentality, when he heard that the mercenaries had taken down Lansong Kingdom after destroying Jiaoji, he was naturally furious. He was furious in the palace. Even though the only one who told him was the chief eunuch, Chao Jixiang, he was still furious. What is he trying to do? Doesn't he know that Lansong Kingdom is also one of the countries that Emperor Taizu set not to conquer? Doesn't he know that Lansong Kingdom is also the Lao's protectorate of Great Ming? What reason does he have to occupy it just like that? He roared like a madman, not caring about how terrifying he looked at this moment. After shouting this, Zhu Qizhan looked at Chao Jixiang and asked loudly, "Great partner, what's his reason?" "Your Majesty." Chao Jixiang's face was filled with apprehension, as if he was shocked by the emperor's might. However, from the way he answered the question, it could be seen that he was not truly afraid. Not long ago, the Lansong Kingdom sent out tens of thousands of troops to attack Hanoi City together with the famous general of Jiaoji, Fan Yuhai. However, they did not manage to take it down. However, I heard that many of the mercenaries died in this battle. Is there such a thing? Zhu Qizhan acted as if he didn't know anything. In fact, when this news was reported, he clapped his hands in joy. In his opinion, the loss of the mercenaries was a good thing. At least it proved that they were human and could die. But now, he didn't want to think about it at all. Instead, after hearing Chao Jixiang's answer, he said with disappointment, "This Panjacet is really too much. Why did he provoke the mercenaries and give them an excuse to attack?" Sigh. This sigh showed Zhu Qizhan's attitude. He could only pinch his nose and admit to this matter. In fact, he couldn't not admit it. Who told the mercenaries to become the victors? The victors had the right to do anything with a condescending attitude. "Your Majesty, this subject has something to say." Seeing that Zhu Qizhan's anger seemed to have subsided, Chao Jixiang tried to speak. "Great partner, if you have something to say, then say it. We forgive you." "Thank you, Your Majesty." "In fact, Your Majesty, the mercenaries' current actions are not a bad thing for us. The bigger their territory, the more people they will send in, and the less mobile forces they will have. When they expand to a certain extent, their foundation will inevitably become unstable. At that time, our new army should have finished training, and it will be time for a large-scale counterattack. At that time, as long as we defeat the mercenaries, wouldn't everything they have now become the Great Mings and Your Majesties in the future?" Chao Jixiang observed Zhu Qizhan's expression as he spoke. As a eunuch, his job was to solve the emperor's problems. Therefore, restoring the emperor's confidence was one of his duties as the head of the eunuchs. "HM?" Zhu Qizhan seriously considered Chao Jixiang's words. After a while, his dark expression finally cleared up and he smiled. "That's right. Great partner is right. As long as we become strong and can defeat the mercenaries, then what they have will be ours in the future." "Haha. Right, right. We are going to train the new army with all our strength. As long as the army is strong enough, who would dare to oppose us?" Ha ha ha. As if he had thought it through, Zhu Qizhan was no longer angry about this matter. He didn't even send someone to reprimand Yang Chendong on the surface. Instead, he put all his energy into training the new army. He even took out 3 million taels of silver from the national treasury for this. Through trading people, the Southern Ming Empire really did have some savings. Bai Ming was too far away and couldn't participate in anything. The Southern Ming Empire had its own little plans. Due to its own strength, it had to admit everything. As for Min Wang, while stabilizing the foundation, he had some thoughts. For example, he wanted to try to contact Yang Chendong. However, Zhu Huaiming's thoughts were quickly dissuaded by his officials. According to these officials, now that the mercenaries were in the limelight, it would be difficult to gain any benefits by allying with them. It was better to wait for them to lose due to their arrogance. At that time, the price to pay for allying with them would be much lower. Following the advice of his officials, Zhu Huiming focused on stabilizing the territory and didn't send anyone to contact the mercenaries. The few major powers in the north didn't make any movements. All of this was within Yang Qindong's expectations. However, the few countries around Laos didn't make any movements at all. This made him somewhat puzzled. Logically speaking, since the mercenaries were so powerful, the Ava dynasty, Myanmar, in the northwest, Siam, Thailand, in the west, and the Phnom Penh dynasty, Cambodia, in the south, should also have some reaction. At the very least, they should have sent someone to contact him. They should have either acknowledged the mercenaries' sovereignty over the Lan Xang kingdom or directly established diplomatic relations. However, why was there no movement at all? It was just like if you had taken over a county, the nearby counties should not be indifferent. Therefore, this was very abnormal. It wasn't until the Security Bureau sent news that Fan Yuhai was having a secret meeting with the generals of the 3 countries in Siam that Yang Qindong figured out the reason. Haha, Fan Yuhai, not bad, not bad. He said not bad twice in a row, showing that he was really in a good mood at this moment. Tiger's Man and Beta Persei heard this, and both of them were puzzled. Who was Fan Yuhai? He was a remnant of Jiaoji. If it wasn't for this person, there wouldn't have been the previous siege of Hanoi City. In that battle, Long Feng and the auxiliary soldiers lost their brothers. Such a person was definitely an enemy. He was the kind of person who must be killed when they meet. However, why did the young master say that he was not bad? Yang Qindong's idea was actually very simple. It was because Fan Yuhai had previously led the trouble to the Lan Xang kingdom, which gave the mercenaries a chance to send troops. Now that he had led the trouble to the Siam kingdom, wasn't this still creating an opportunity for him? Previously, Yang Qindong had thought about whether to let Fan Yuhai go. Of course, this didn't mean that he wouldn't eliminate him. He just wanted to eliminate him later so that he could lead more countries into this situation and create enough excuses for him to attack. In fact, when he entered the Lan Xang kingdom, Yang Qindong had thanked him in his heart. What he did not expect was that Fan Yuhai seemed to know what he was thinking. Fan Yuhai had contacted the generals of Siam in such a short time. Moreover, he had contacted the generals of 3 countries at once. Fan Yuhai was really his soulmate. He was happy that he had an excuse, but Yang Qindong wouldn't launch an attack immediately. War wasn't as simple as just talking about it. Every battle involved too many things. There was information, terrain, comparison of forces and deployment, logistical support, provisions and equipment, morale, and so on. If any of these were not prepared, it might lead to the failure of the war. Especially now that the army was still suppressing the foreign forces in Laos province. Without enough troops, Yang Qindong wouldn't make any decisions lightly. Order the Security Bureau to not be afraid of spending money. Find a way to understand more about the other party. After saying this to Tiger's Mane, Yang Qindong put the matter aside. Even if there was a war, he would have to wait for Luopa and Wushang to be free. For now, he just had to wait and see. For now, it was better to help his future brother-in-law manage the situation in Laos province. The hearts of the people were the foundation of a country. In order to stabilize and gather the hearts of the people as soon as possible, Yang Qindong planned to bring the model of Yang Bao to Laos province. Previously, Yang Bao had been wandering around Ming's capital and nearby areas. Because of the traffic and the situation, Yang Qindong's publication was very early, but its development was very slow. This was especially so after Yang Qindong left Ming and went to the south. Yang Qindong even stopped publishing for a time. Who knew if someone would secretly make a move against them when he was no longer around? Lao province was different. This was Yang Qindong's territory, and he had the final say. If Yang Qindong wanted to publish Yang Qindong's newspaper here, he would not face any restrictions. Instead, he would have the full support of the local government. If he wanted to gather the hearts of the people, he had to let them know who he was and what he wanted to do. What did he do for them? Chapter 596. How could he achieve this result? Public opinion and propaganda were obviously very important. Yang Bao became the medium to communicate the close relationship between the government and the people. With Yang Qindong's approval, Every large city in Laos that was occupied had a large tea house that was being renovated. It was named the World Knowledge Tea House. Once the tea house was completed, it would be open to the public. It would also become the place where Yang Bao sold and published. Considering that many people did not read books and could not read at all, this tea house also had the function of reading newspapers. In other words, as long as you entered this tea house, as long as it was business hours, there would be people reading the latest Yang Bao content for free. This ensured that everyone would know what was happening outside, what new policies were coming up, and what benefits the people could get. Not only that, but world knowledge was also free. In other words, drinking tea was free. This greatly lowered the threshold to enter this place. Of course, other than tea, other snacks, wine, and dishes would require money. After all, the tea house had to continue operating. In this way, unless the people who came were poor, as long as they had a bit of status, they would feel embarrassed to only drink tea and not order anything else. On average, there would not be a problem to break even with world knowledge. Because of the popularity, it would not be a problem to earn money at all. Speaking of which, even if it did not make money, Yang Chenong planned to subsidize and support it financially. After all, this was originally a propaganda tool. Those who were illiterate could listen to it for free and understand the world's affairs. Those who were literate could directly buy the latest issue of Yang Bao and take it home to slowly read it. Not only that, if something interesting happened around you, such as some family affairs, strange or funny things, it would be counted. If you were treated unfairly by the government, you could also tell such a story to the staff of World Knowledge. Once it was accepted and included in the Yang Bao, not only would the matter be valued by more people, there would be a high chance that it would be solved, and you would also receive a certain amount of information fees. This was also a good way to make money. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that the emergence of this policy actually gave birth to the journalist industry. There were actually some unaccomplished scholars who began to wander the streets and alleys in search of all kinds of things that happened among the common people. They then wrote stories and submitted them to Yang Bao to earn royalties. Needless to say, some people really became rich because of this. The emergence of Yang Bao became a bridge between the government and the people. Once the matter of the people was reported to Yang Bao, the government must pay attention to it. It should be known that this Yang Bao was not only read by Governor Luan Shaoqian, but also the sixth young master would pay attention to it from time to time. If the matter was not properly solved, it would not be his ability problem. In the next official examination, they would be eliminated. The appearance of Yang Bao had greatly affected the efficiency of the government, so they didn't dare to play any tricks. Many people also benefited from this. Yang Bao was affectionately called the people's own newspaper. Because of this, the World Knowledge Tea House was full every day. Other than some high-ranking officials and nobles who liked to appear here and know the contents of Yang Bao immediately, many people who had a little spare money were also willing to spend money here. These people seemed to be afraid that the World Knowledge Tea House would not be able to continue operating because of free tea. In this case, if they had any grievances or hatred, they would not have a direct channel to the higher-ups. Therefore, Sure Air and the others would come to support them. Once an industry was recognized by the people and received the support of the people, not only would it have a greater influence, but the speed of making money would also begin to accelerate. In less than a month, the World Knowledge Tea House turned its losses into profits. This was greatly beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. It was just that he had no intention of earning any money from this aspect. In line with the idea of taking from the people and using for the people, he ordered to increase the return of the author's fee and information fee. As a result, more and more people either raised the information or directly submitted a draft. Some people, when they really couldn't find any problems with the government, wrote a story about how his neighbor quarreled with each other last night and didn't sleep well. From this point of view, it was clear how influential Yang Bao was. And it was such a newspaper that allowed the people to be able to protect their rights. It allowed them to write about the government's policies and various stories that seemed to have happened to them. It greatly reduced the distance between them and the government and strengthened their recognition and identity of the Lao government. Seeing the effect of Yang Chendong's paper was so good, he waved his pen and asked Vietnam to follow suit. He also sent some of Yang Bao's experienced people to help Vietnam. And just a month later, dozens of world knowledge tea houses also sprouted like bamboo shoots after the rain in the major cities of Vietnam. There was a trend of more and more of them, and the distance between the mercenaries and the Vietnamese people was shortened. Waiting for the dust to settle, Yang Chendong had already stayed in Lao province for 3 months, and Luan Shaochen had been the provincial governor for more than 2 months. He had already begun to adapt to the new environment and work. In 3 months, Long Fong and the auxiliary soldiers rode bicycles all over Laos, conquering one city after another. In the face of an invincible force, more and more people surrendered. Lao province was finally liberated. During this time, the Phnom Penh dynasty, Siam dynasty, and Awad dynasty did not do anything. It was as if they did not see this at all. These people seemed to have the mentality of not getting close, and not offending the mercenaries. If it was a weak person who had just taken over a new force, they would need a long period of stability. It could be 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 or 20 years. If it was Yang Chendong, of course he wouldn't sit and wait. From his experience, the 3 neighboring countries would not really let Lao province develop so smoothly. The only reason they did not act was because they had not found the right opportunity. For example, once the main force of the mercenaries left, the siege of Hanoi province would most likely repeat. Now that Lao province had a clear political system, the people were united, and the people were stable. It was time for stable development. Yang Chendong would never allow the same thing to happen again. So, if others did not come looking for trouble with him, he would take the initiative to find trouble with others. Since he had to fight, it was better to fight outside. At least, if he fought outside, he would not feel the slightest bit of heartache even if the city was destroyed. He called Yang from the Foreign Affairs Department. After making contributions in the liberation wars of Vietnam and Laos, he had been promoted and became the director of the Foreign Affairs Department. He was in charge of the major matters in this area. Yang Chendong called him over because he wanted to hear his opinion on the war. He had been promoted and gained more power. The burden on his shoulders had also become heavier. Yang was a smart man. After he was promoted to director, he learned more about the situation of the Foreign Affairs Group of the Security Bureau and sent more people. He wanted to understand the situation of the 3 provinces and understand it thoroughly so that the 6th young master could make the next step. Waiting for Yang Chendong to ask him, he explained the plan he had in mind for a long time in detail. The 6th young master, Fan Yuhai, is still wandering in the Chiang Rai area of Siam. To outsiders, it seems that they have no contact with the higher-ups of Siam. However, our people have already investigated and found that their relationship is not as strange as it seems. On the contrary, the food for the 5,000 elite cavalry was provided by Siam. They should be waiting for an opportunity. As expected, listening to the information reported by Skylark, Yang Chendong nodded his head in deep thought. Since Siam was secretly supporting Fan Yuhai, it meant that they did not want to be on good terms with him. The reason why they did not act now was that the time was not right. Go on, Director Yang. When do you think they will attack us? What should we do? Yang Chendong wanted to test Yang. He wanted to see how much Yang's thoughts were similar to his own. Seeing Yang Chendong's look of approval, Yang was encouraged and continued, 6th young master, whether it is Fan Yuhai or Siam, they will definitely be our enemies. After all, the development of Lao province is very good. With the completion of the commercial street and its use, it has attracted a lot of businessmen. This is a treasure trove. No one will not be jealous. But as for when they will come, I'm not sure. However, they must be waiting for an opportunity when they think it is suitable to send troops, or when our forces are empty, just like when the Lansong soldiers attacked Hanoi. Well said. Yang Chendong nodded approvingly. This was what he thought. Director Yang, do you think we should take the initiative to attack them? No, I don't think so. Yang replied with a very firm tone. Oh, why? Yang Chendong's interest was piqued. 6th young master, I have sent people to investigate Siam. I found that Siam is not weak in terms of military strength or economic ability. Especially in the absence of war in recent years, their internal development speed was very fast. Now, just the military strength alone already had 500,000 soldiers. If the situation required, they could recruit another 300,000 soldiers. With such a strong military strength, if we take the initiative to attack, I am afraid that we will not be able to gain much advantage. Even if we can defeat them, it will consume a lot of our resources. There is no room for us to develop in other areas in a short time. If other countries suddenly attack us at that time, such as the Phnom Penh dynasty in the south, we will be in a bad situation where we have to fight on both sides. This is very disadvantageous. Chapter 597. After saying this, Yunk was afraid that what he said would diminish his own prestige and boost the morale of others, so he quickly added, "Although our mercenaries are very powerful and are not afraid of any enemy, if the plan is more thorough, we can completely avoid such a situation. Isn't that better?" How can the plan be more thorough? Yang Chendong had already heard the meaning of Yunk's words. Presumably, this person with a talent for intelligence must have a very good idea. First, enter the Phnom Penh dynasty and solve the problem in the south. We don't have to completely occupy them. In fact, we don't have enough manpower now, but as long as we are afraid of them, it will be fine. So, when Siam dares to make a move, we have nothing to worry about. Of course, if it is done well, this is also a show of strength to scare the tiger, and it can buy some time for development. As if he had made a big decision, Yunk said this in one breath, and then stared at Yang Chendong intently, waiting for the sixth young master's answer. Attacking the Phnom Penh dynasty first was the final decision made by Yunk after understanding and investigating everything in the past 3 months. If it was rejected by the sixth young master, it meant that all the previous efforts would be in vain. The plan would have to be pushed back, which not only took time, but also made him lose face in the eyes of the sixth young master. This was definitely not what he wanted to see. Yang Chendong listened carefully to Yunk's plan, but did not immediately express his opinion. Instead, he got up and walked to the sand table not far away. When Yunk also walked to his side, he asked casually, "If we want to attack the Phnom Penh kingdom, we always need a reasonable reason." "Sixth young master, your subordinate has already prepared a reason. As long as you give the order, we can brazenly kill our way over." Hearing Yang Chendong's request for a reason, Yunk's heart pounded rapidly. He knew that this was the sixth young master's approval of his plan and had begun to consider how to implement it. What kind of reason? Yang Chendong hadn't thought that Skylark would have thought of this, and he couldn't help but look at her in a new light. "Sixth young master, I have already made arrangements. First, I spent a lot of money to buy 50 sets of enemy military uniforms from the right prime minister done of the Golden Border dynasty. Then, they would send out intelligence agents to disguise themselves as them and attack the Salangan family's caravan. By the way, the Sarangans are a famous business family in Laos. They are very rich and have always had business dealings with the Phnom Penh dynasty." Listening to Skylark's plan step by step, Yang Chendong's mind was filled with 2 words: shift the blame onto others. That's right, Skylark's plan was to blame the Golden Rim dynasty for the ambush of the Salangans. In this way, the mercenaries would have enough manpower to send out troops. After all, since the Salangans paid the taxes to the mercenaries on time, the mercenaries should protect their safety and business interests. It had to be said that this plan was pretty good. It was a commonly used excuse to invade. However, looking at Skylark's arrangement, he seemed to be more prepared and detailed. Well, this is a good plan, but it's not enough. The Golden Rim dynasty has never been in our eyes, but the strength of Siam should not be underestimated. The young master thinks we should do this, Yang Chendong said, making up for some flaws in the plan. Skylark listened with stars in his eyes. He had a feeling that the sixth young master must have wanted to do this for a long time. The reason why he said it was because he wanted to test himself and listen to other people's opinions. In any case, this time his answer should be very satisfactory to the sixth young master, and his impression of him would be better. Yang Chendong's impression of Skylark was indeed good. This person was good at intelligence and dared to be a lone hero. Now, his ability to trick people was also very good. Anyone who had such an opponent would have a headache. Of course, it was a blessing to have such a subordinate. There were many things that he did not need to think too much about, and Skylark would do everything for him. Such a subordinate was worrisome and reassuring. With Skylark's ability, would he betray his master one day? Haha, he believed that as Skylark understood the strength and power of the mercenaries, Such thoughts would become smaller and smaller until they did not exist at all. Yang Chendong could promote a person, and he could also destroy a person. However, no matter how much he thought about it, Skylark wouldn't do such a thing. He was a smart person, and smart people would know how to do it. They would be able to obtain more benefits while protecting themselves. No one knew what Yang Chendong and Skylark talked about. In short, Skylark left with a face full of excitement. After some time, Tiger's man was called into the study room and received an order. That was to secretly transfer the 6 battalions and 1 regiment of the newly formed auxiliary troops over to Laos. He had great use for them. Currently, there were 2 main regiments and 22 auxiliary battalions of the Cold Vanguard Army in Lao Province. Overall, there were about 12,000 soldiers. Even with the 30,000 Laotian troops led by He Guang, it did not reach 50,000. In the eyes of outsiders, it was clearly not enough to start a war against the 3 neighboring countries with just this amount of military power. Although it was said that quality was the most important thing in an army, if there were too few men, they would not even be able to defend the city. How could that be possible? In order to make preparations, Yang Chendong could only go to Chichen City to transfer more troops. With another Cold Vanguard regiment and 6 other battalions, although there were only 4,000 men, it was still not enough. However, it was more than enough to deal with the current situation. At least the plan could be carried out. Our forces are still too little. Yang Chendong sighed and shook his head, suppressing the thought. With his current strength and the number of people under his control, it was not too difficult to build an army of a few 100,000 men. However, how could an army like that fight? He wanted to build elite troops. This way, not only could he equip them with the best equipment, he could also save a lot of money. Although he didn't lack money now, there were too many things he wanted to do. For example, he was preparing to build cement roads in all directions on all the land he occupied. Just this project alone would cost a lot of money. After Skylark received Yang Chendong's permission, he began to plan. Only 10 days later, he received news that the caravan of the Sorangan family was returning from Golden Rim City, the capital of the Golden Rim dynasty. Tell them to get ready. The plan will be carried out at Shangding. Skylark said confidently. Shangding. It was one of the cities in the Golden Rim dynasty. It was close to the Mekong River and was very close to the Lao province. Because of the importance of the geographical location, it had also become an important supply point for many caravans. Nashin was leading the caravan here to replenish their supplies. As an established business family in Laos, they bought a lot of new products from the commercial street in Wansheng City when it opened. Then, he led a team to deliver the goods to Phnom Penh Dynasty's capital, Phnom Penh City. After making a big profit there, they returned. Rare goods were sold in the commercial street, such as perfumes and mirrors, which were priceless. Even the colorful underwear and cheongsams were sought-after goods in the eyes of the nobles of various countries. In less than a day, all the goods were sold out, and the price was increased by 10% in the process. The profit from this trip alone was more than 20 times the profit of selling ordinary goods. Nashin, who had made a lot of money, was grinning from ear to ear. He took the caravan of more than 100 people and 6 carts out of Shangding. He rented a big boat and sailed to the Mekong River. He wanted to take advantage of the fact that these goods were selling well and make more trips to the Sorangan family to ensure a higher status in the family. His face was full of confidence, and he even began to imagine how popular he would be when he returned to the clan this time, and how people would look at him with worshipful eyes. Suddenly, he saw a military ship coming from afar. The reason why he said it was a military ship was because the deck of the opposite ship was full of men wearing the Golden Rim Dynasty's military uniform. From afar, they were all majestic. Their armor shone in the reflection of the sun. The sabers in their hands glowed with cold light, carrying a murderous aura. A military ship? When he saw the ship, Na Xian still had a question mark in his heart. He didn't know how many times he had been to the Mekong River, but this was the first time he saw a military ship. The doubt in his heart just flashed through his mind. After all, the most important thing was to deal with the problem at hand. He hurriedly made a gesture to a guard behind him. The guard turned back to the cabin and came back with a money bag with 100 taels of silver in his hand. Nashin took the money bag and put it in his arms. He felt that it was heavy, and at the same time, he felt more confident. When he saw the military ship approaching his ship, he didn't feel so nervous. Come out and be checked. After a wide plank was placed on the ship, the soldiers on the opposite side came over and approached Nashin. Haha, thank you for your hard work. But I wonder why you are here. With a fawning expression, he immediately went up to greet them. What? Do we have to greet you if we want to appear anywhere? The leader of the soldiers looked unhappy. No, I'm just curious. I've never seen you on this route before. Of course, you can appear anywhere you want. By the way, we have a very good relationship with General Dagon. Every time we go to Golden Rim City, we will visit him in his mansion. While smiling, he talked about his background. Chapter 598. Those who were able to trade between the two countries had to have a powerful background. The Solingen family had found a backer in the Golden Border Dynasty, General Dagon. This person was also the #1 general of the Golden Border Dynasty. So you are General Dagon's men? The leader nodded thoughtfully, then approached Na Xian and said, To tell you the truth, Lao province has been occupied by mercenaries. His Majesty is worried that they will suddenly make a move. So he sent us to check the river to see if there are any suspicious people. The leader's attitude had changed greatly, which was within Na Xian's expectations. In the past, it was not like he had never been inspected by a military officer on land, but usually, as long as he reported his name and gave some money, he would be sent away. This time, he did not think too much. Instead, he took out 100 taels of silver from his pocket and handed it to the leader as he said with a smile, We are all honest businessmen. We never participate in politics, so don't worry. He reached out and took the 100 taels of silver. After casually weighing it, the leader nodded with satisfaction. Okay, you don't look like bad guys. How about this? Gather everyone and let us put on a show. It will be easier to explain when we go back. Okay. After receiving the silver, the other party's attitude became much more polite. He accepted the letter and smiled. Then, he turned around and called out to his men, Come, everyone, come out. This is just a routine inspection. Let's go for a walk. Under Na Xian's orders, the caravan's servants walked out of the cabins one by one and gathered on the spacious deck. More than 100 people were forced to line up in a few rows before standing properly. It wasn't just them. Even the boatmen were summoned to undergo inspection. Sir, look, everyone is here. They are all honest people. He smiled mischievously and waited for this sir to finish his inspection before continuing his journey back to the country. Everyone is here? Not a single one? The leader asked in disbelief. Of course not. Na Xian had no intention of going against the leader. Of course, he did not have any intention of hiding anyone. Then let's search again. The soldiers still didn't seem to believe it and ordered his soldiers. Before long, the soldiers began to walk around the ship. After some time, they came out one by one. Then they nodded and said, There's no one left. See? What did I say? Is there really no one? How could we have the guts to lie to the military master? Now that everyone has come out and the inspection is over, can we let them pass? He also thought that these soldiers were too serious. Thinking that he had a military background and had given the other party benefits, everything should be over by now. A cold smile appeared on the corner of the soldier's mouth. This smile fell into the eyes of Na Xian. He didn't know why, but he suddenly had a bad feeling. Under this feeling, his body involuntarily took 2 steps back. The soldier didn't seem to notice his actions. Instead, he walked towards the people on the deck. As he walked, he said, Look at all of you. Each and every one of you has shifty eyes. Why do you all look like bad people? Well, it seems that General Hun-san is right. Those who seek refuge with General Dagon are not good people. So, you can all go to hell. Kill. Everyone was still digesting the soldier's words. Suddenly, there was a flash of sword light. 50 soldiers simultaneously slashed at the hundreds of people who were surrounded. Not to mention that they weren't prepared. Even if they were, how could they be opponents when they were unarmed? Ah! Ouch! It hurts. Ouch, ouch, ouch. They're killing people. Run. Suddenly, all kinds of shouts came from below the deck. The pungent smell of blood also entered everyone's nostrils. Na Xian, who had already felt that something was wrong, saw the scene in front of him. How could he not know what was going on? At that moment, he turned pale with fright. He desperately turned around and ran to the side of the ship behind him. Don't let him escape. Otherwise, General Hun Sen will definitely take our lives. As if he just noticed Na Xian, the leader of the soldiers shouted and chased after him with his sword. Na Xian had already taken a few steps back, so he was very close to the side of the ship. Now he was desperately running away, so his speed was even faster. Almost as soon as the voice fell, he jumped into the river. After a splash, he disappeared into the river. Oh, why did one of them run away? Shoot the arrows. The leader of the soldiers was furious. But after the order was issued, the soldiers around him didn't intend to shoot the arrows. Instead, they continued to kill the people on the ship. In just a moment, more than 100 people became corpses. No one was left alive. Oh, take away the valuable things on the ship, and then cut the ship. Brothers, get ready to withdraw. The leader of the soldiers laughed. The mission was successfully completed. It was time to leave and report to Master Young. Yes, they were the spies of the Security Bureau who entered the Golden Border Dynasty one step earlier. This time, they were ordered by the Director of Foreign Affairs, Master Young, to intercept the merchant ship of the Solingen family here and let one live. As for why they did this, they didn't need to think too much. The Security Bureau always had their own rules. It had become a habit to just do and not say. As for Nongxin, he jumped into the river and dived into the distance. Fortunately, he went out all year round and was good at swimming. There weren't many waves on the river, and it was broad daylight. He quickly found the right direction and escaped. After getting ashore, he identified the direction and rushed all the way, ignoring hunger and thirst. Finally, he entered Laos after 4 days. Then, he found a branch of the Solingen Company. After revealing his identity, he got into a carriage and rushed to Wanxiang City overnight. After another 7 days, Nongxin finally saw the city gate of Wanxiang City. At this moment, he couldn't stop his tears from flowing. He was like a child who finally found his parents. He instantly had a pillar of support. In the ancestral courtyard of the Solingen family, the people with some status and those who could take charge of the family were all gathered. In the main seat, there was a young man full of vitality and exuding endless energy. He was the new patriarch of the family, Nongxin Si. Nongxin Si had been smart since he was young, especially when it came to business and dealing with people. He had shown great talent since he was very young. Every business that he handled brought great benefits to the family, and he became a role model for the younger generation. Since it was a big family, there was naturally no lack of talents. On the contrary, the mentality of seniority was very serious. Even if Nongxin Si had the ability, he still needed a huge opportunity to rise up. Otherwise, he could only wait until he had enough seniority. Nongxin Si's luck was quite good. The opportunity had finally arrived. The seemingly powerful Lan Kingdom had been destroyed in a single night. While everyone was still watching and still had a glimmer of hope for the former Emperor Pius, Nongxi decisively made his move. Since they were a business family, they naturally knew more about the outside world. Otherwise, it would be easy for them to be taken advantage of. When Nongxin Si was purchasing goods from a business street in Yunnan province, he was the person in charge of this. From there, he heard a lot about the sixth young master and saw how powerful the mercenaries were. Now, he knew that the Lan Kingdom would definitely become a thing of the past. It was impossible for them to make a comeback. As such, he immediately made the decision to form a good relationship with the mercenaries. Opportunities were always prepared for those who were prepared. Since he couldn't form a relationship with the mercenaries, Nongxin Si took the initiative to look for the former state preceptor Long Qi and expressed his intention to form an alliance. Long Qi was also the winner of this political change. Although he wouldn't be able to enjoy any power in the future, he received 5 million taels of business capital. Not only that, he was also allowed to do business in the new Lao province. He wouldn't be pushed aside by the Han merchants in the business street. This was Long Qi's advantage. After Nongxin Si came looking for him, the retired state preceptor felt like a tiger that had grown wings. He now only had money and business qualifications, but he didn't know how to do business and how to make more money. All of these happened to be the strengths of the Sorangan family. A strong alliance, this was what they wanted. Long Qi agreed to the Sorangan family's request for cooperation. As the person who put forward the proposal, Nongxin Si's contribution couldn't go unnoticed. He seized the opportunity and became the new patriarch of the family. The old patriarch entered a state of seclusion. After becoming the new patriarch, Nongxin Si wanted to bring the family to a higher level of glory. He ordered several merchant teams to set off together. He wanted to show everyone how right it was to choose him as the patriarch. However, no one expected that something would happen. Not only did they lose their money, but more than 100 people were killed. If it weren't for Nongxin's good swimming skills and quick reaction, he would have died as well. The Sorangan family would still be in the dark. Nongxin Si knelt on the ground and told everyone what happened at the Mekong River in front of the new patriarch and his family members. As soon as his voice fell, it immediately attracted the angry condemnation of the other clansmen. Bastards, how can these people be so shameless? They're clearly acting like bandits. We can't just let it go like this. We must give them an explanation. Yes, they must give us an explanation. More and more family members were infected by the angry atmosphere. They were filled with righteous indignation. It was as if they would rush to Phnom Penh dynasty and kill the soldiers if they were given a knife. Compared to the angry faces of the other family members, Nongxin Si didn't shout with them. Instead, he began to analyze the whole thing seriously. Chapter 599. Judging from the testimony in the letter, it was obvious that there was a conflict between the two generals of the Golden Rim dynasty. Later, when they saw that the Sorangan family had made so much money, General Hun Sen disregarded General Dan's face and suddenly attacked them. It was the best of both worlds. The only fly in the ointment was that he had escaped back after accepting the letter, and the truth had come to light. The Sorangan family had been doing business for generations, so they had some money. However, it was obviously unrealistic to say that they wanted to compete with the generals of a country. If they really dared to do so, it would be like hitting a stone with an egg. In the end, the whole family's business in the Golden Bien dynasty would be wiped out. Businessmen mainly pursued wealth, so they would not use weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Fighting with force was obviously not what Nong Si wanted, nor was it in line with the family's interests. However, since Hun Sen had made a move, how could he let it go? How could he easily bow his head? He would probably not even admit what he had done in the past. In this case, things were a bit tricky. While Nong Si was still thinking about the gains and losses of this matter, the family members had stopped arguing and looked at him. It seemed that this time, the patriarch needed to make a decision. Everyone, please calm down. Let me discuss this matter with Mr. Long Qi and then make a decision. He, Nong Si, didn't make any rash decisions in public. He knew that the more important the matter was, the more he had to calm down. Otherwise, if he acted rashly, he might bring terrible consequences to his entire family. Since the patriarch had spoken, no one had any better ideas, so they had to agree. However, some elders had already said that if this matter was not handled properly, they would consider reconvening the family meeting to choose a new patriarch. Nong Si could be promoted because he had Long Qi's support. However, if this support could not guarantee the family's interests, then they did not mind inviting the old patriarch. From this matter, it could be seen that many people were jealous of Nong Si's promotion. The family was not stable. Knowing the elders' intentions, Nong Si was not angry. Instead, he smiled and promised that the matter would be solved. After that, he brought a few of his attendants to the former state preceptor's residence and met with Long Qi. He was no longer the state preceptor, and Long Qi didn't have as many official matters as before. Even the nobles of Kanglin were still ostracizing him. He wasn't used to being idle all of a sudden. Fortunately, the road of business had opened, and he had already begun to reap rewards. Shining silver entered his pocket, making him smile so widely that he couldn't close his mouth. He also seemed to have suddenly become younger. Knowing that Nong Si had come, Long Qi laughed and walked into the main hall. He thought that the Golden Bien dynasty was going to settle the bill. He heard that he could get nearly 50,000 taels of silver, which was equivalent to several years of his salary. How could he not be happy? Mr. Long, something's happened. When he saw Long Qi, Nong Si immediately put down his pride as the patriarch. He cupped his fists and repeated what he said in the letter. Long Qi retracted his complacent expression and quietly listened to Nong Si's words. After understanding the whole situation, his first thought was that the other party wanted to take advantage of him and take advantage of him. But after thinking about it carefully, the other party now had more to rely on him, so they shouldn't do such a thing. Could it be that someone really didn't have eyes and took their money? It was difficult to do business, especially when you had to look at the faces of high officials and nobles. Sometimes you might even suffer a lot if you couldn't manage one aspect well. Although Long Qi hadn't done business before, he still knew the truth. But usually, the smaller the business, the greater the constraints. On the contrary, the more powerful the family, the easier it would be to do business. This was the power of connections. The Sorangan family had been doing business for generations. They had some connections and roots in some neighboring countries, even in the Great Ming dynasty. Logically speaking, such a robbery and murder shouldn't fall on them. But why did such a thing suddenly happen? As a former state preceptor, Long Qi obviously thought more than Nong Si, a businessman. It was precisely because he thought more that he felt the trickiness of this matter. Mr. Patriarch, what are you going to do? Long Qi didn't express his opinion immediately. It was a habit he had cultivated for many years. Before making a final decision, he would first listen to other people's opinions and learn from their strengths to make up for his weaknesses. Mr. Long, I want to send someone to communicate with General Hun Sen and see if I can persuade him. If they don't give us face, we can ask General Mun for help and let him put pressure on them. In short, if we don't solve this problem, our caravan can't go to the Golden Border dynasty. Nong Si had thought of many countermeasures along the way, but he still felt that these conventional methods were not enough. That's right. Long Qi nodded in agreement. He agreed with Nong Si's suggestion. But Nong Si's face showed a hint of hesitation. But what? Mr. Patriarch, since we are already partners, just say what you want to say. Long Qi showed a trace of dissatisfaction with Nong Si's method of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. He had been an official for many years and held a high position. What hadn't he seen before? How could he not see through Nong Si's tricks? After being exposed, Nong Si's face showed a trace of embarrassment, but he soon returned to normal. A businessman must be thick-skinned. This was always the most important factor. A person who flinched when faced with a problem was destined to not achieve great things. Yes, Mr. Long, you're right. It's my fault. After admitting his mistake, Nong Si went straight to the point. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to resolve this matter. Since General Hun Sen has already taken action, he won't spit out the fat meat that's already in his mouth. In fact, he might even deny it. If that's the case, I'm afraid that even if General Dian puts pressure on him, it won't work. Not to mention, it's still unknown whether the two generals will really fall out with each other for a businessman like us. So, we have to make other preparations. Other preparations? What do you mean? Long Qi naturally understood the reason behind it. Officials protecting each other was not just a saying. When facing merchants, officials would always have a sense of superiority. Naturally, Nong Si's considerations had their own reasons. After pondering for a moment, Nong Si finally raised his head and said to Long Qi, we have to be prepared. If we really can't do it, we can ask for help from the mercenaries. Ask for help from the mercenaries? Long Qi was shocked after hearing this. Then he shook his head and said, No. How can the mercenaries bother with such a small matter? Besides, the Golden Border dynasty is an independent dynasty. They have no subordinate relationship with the mercenaries. Long Qi shook his head, of course. He used to be a state preceptor, but now he was just a commoner. Previously, Yunk wanted to use him, so he was allowed to make conditions. Now that he was given 5 million taels of silver, he was allowed to do business, and he was given priority to take some goods from the commercial street. This was already very considerate. One shouldn't push one's luck. Naturally, this was also because Long Qi was currently in a weaker position. Otherwise, who knows how many times he would have taken advantage of this situation. Why not? Nong Si's face was firm. Mr. Long, didn't the mercenaries say that? They will protect the people. Oh no, it's the interests of the people under them. Now that we are in Laos, We are already considered citizens here. We are doing business and have paid the business tax. Now that we have a problem, shouldn't we ask for help? Nongsi wanted to say that he should ask for an explanation from them, but he knew that he should keep it to himself. He didn't have the guts to make things difficult for the mercenaries. I still can't. Long Chi was first persuaded by Nongsi's words, but then he shook his head. Now he was just a commoner. Who knew if the mercenaries would care about him? If he took the initiative to ask for help, what if the mercenaries suddenly wanted to settle old scores? Money moved people's hearts. Now everyone knew that he had received 5 million taels of silver from the mercenaries. If someone wanted to take advantage of him and took the initiative to ask for money, should he give it to them? As for whether the mercenaries would do this, anyway, when Long Chi was the state preceptor, he did this many times. Judging others by their own standards, of course he would think that this was the right thing to do. Long Chi shook his head like a rattle drum, which made Nongsi feel a little discouraged. The reason why he wanted to work with Long Chi was not only because he could get more goods from the business street, but also because of Long Chi's connections and identity. If he couldn't even do this, why should he work with Long Chi and give up the benefits? This was not an ordinary matter. It was related to whether he could continue to be the head of the family. If he couldn't find a reasonable solution, he would be beaten back to his original state. It might even be worse than before. After all, everyone knew that he had the ambition to be the head of the family. Back then, no matter who became the head of the family, they would all suppress him. Now that he was the head of the family, of course, Nongsi didn't want to return to the past, let alone the past that was worse than before. Nongsi didn't want to be too harsh, but he had no choice but to use his trump card. Mr. Long, you must report this matter to the mercenaries and ask them for help. If you can't do that, I don't think there's any need for you to cooperate with the Solingans. What did you say? Long Chi's gaze turned cold. The aura of a superior was revealed at this moment. Chapter 600. It was just an empty threat. Nongsi did not take it seriously. I've already made it very clear. Please reconsider your choice. That's right. Working with you is the result of my insistence. However, if I'm no longer the patriarch because of this, then our cooperation will naturally end. Moreover, I think that even if there's a new patriarch, they won't work with you anymore. After all, cooperation requires both sides to work hard. The threat in Nongsi's words was very obvious. Cooperation required both sides to work hard, and also required both sides to display their strength. If Long Chi did not have the strength, the outcome would be obvious. Long Chi's expression was very ugly at this moment. He wanted to wave his hand and say that if they did not want to cooperate, then so be it. After all, he had the channels to purchase goods and sufficient funds. However, these were not enough for a businessman. What they needed more was a strong sales network. Coincidentally, these were the things that the Sorangan family had and were good at. If he left them, perhaps Long Chi could continue to operate independently. However, it would take a long time to reach a scale. For the sake of money, Long Chi could not make such a brainless decision. Long Chi's expression changed again and again. He smiled very sincerely. Mr. Patriarch, what are you doing? I was just joking. Just as you said, since we are now citizens of Laos, and we are paying business tax, I think they should be more than happy to help us out when we have a problem, right? Long Chi changed his words, or rather, he was forced to change his words. Since the situation was not good, he had no choice but to lower his head. Nongsi smiled in satisfaction. I was just joking with Mr. Long. Since that's the case, when do you think we should talk to the mercenaries about this? This matter cannot be rushed. The mercenaries do big things. How about this? Let me contact them first. I'll give you an answer a day later, Long Chi replied with a smile. He had not contacted Yun Ke for a long time. Now, he did not even know where he was. How could he meet him just because he wanted to? Knowing that Long Chi was going to use his connections, Nongsi's goal was achieved. He smiled and left the state preceptor's residence. In the following time, Long Chi immediately sent out his men. He needed to know where Yun Ke was. Where was Yun Ke? Of course, he was in Wanxiang City. However, as an agent of the Security Bureau, his whereabouts had always been difficult to track. Unless he wanted to meet someone else, It was too difficult to find him except for a limited number of people. It would be difficult for Long Chi to find Skylark. But what he didn't know was that Skylark was paying attention to him. He even got the news that Nong Si went to the Long residence. You're finally anxious? Very good. After hearing his subordinate's report, Skylark's face was filled with a victorious smile. Half a day had passed, but there was still no news about Skylark. It wasn't that his men didn't benefit from it, but the mercenaries were an impenetrable force, and outsiders had no chance to talk to them. They couldn't just go to the camp of the mercenaries or the provincial government to look for them openly, right? If that was the case, it wouldn't be looking for someone, but seeking death. Men, prepare a carriage. We're going to General He's residence. Long Chi had no choice but to rely on his old face to do the job. No matter what, He Guang only joined the mercenaries because of his introduction, so he owed him a favor. However, Long Chi knew that this was the only time he could do this. The next time he had something to do, it was hard to say if He Guang would be willing to meet him. Long Chi was quite lucky. He Guang had just returned from killing bandits outside. After the servant reported, a guard walked out of the residence and led Long Chi to the depths of the residence. In front of the guard, Long Chi also lowered his posture. From this point, it could be seen that he was very clear about his identity. Usually, people like this wouldn't be detestable. In the living room, He Guang met Long Chi. After not seeing him for almost 3 months, He Guang had a colder and more murderous aura. Fortunately, when he saw Long Chi, he intentionally restrained his murderous aura and showed a warm side. State Preceptor Long, please don't, General He. In the future, you can just call me Mr. Long. Long Chi didn't dare to be arrogant and refused repeatedly. Okay, Mr. Long. How do you have time to come to my residence? He Guang laughed. He was very satisfied with Long Chi's intentional lowering of his status. Sigh, it's a long story. Long Chi said while observing He Guang with the corner of his eyes, waiting for him to ask him. Otherwise, if he took the initiative to ask and was rejected, it would be too embarrassing. He Guang was very respectful and asked with a smile, Mr. Long, do you have any other troubles? You put down your political affairs and focus on being a rich man. This is something that I can't ask for. Long Chi shook his head. General He, you only see the glamorous side of me. You don't know that business is not so easy. You also know that I'm working with the Sorangan family. Not long ago, He Guang sat in his seat with a serious face. When he heard that someone had robbed a merchant ship on the Mekong River, he couldn't help but frown. He wasn't faking it. He was really angry at the audacity of the Phnom Penh dynasty's General Hun senator. The current He Guang could be described as a different person than he used to be. With the power of 30,000 soldiers in his hand, he became the representative of the local forces in Laos. Of course, this representative was not self-appointed. The locals were willing to ask him for help. In front of the mercenaries, he didn't dare to call himself the leader of any other forces. This was especially true for the current governor of Laos, Wan Shaochen. Although he was young, he was decisive in his actions. In less than 2 months, 7 officials had died in his hands because of crimes, and more than 30 officials had been exiled and sentenced to death. It was this decisive killing that made the politics of Laos become clear. The dark things of the past had disappeared. After all, no one would joke about their own life. With the military power in his hands, He Guang was even more careful in his actions. Even when others came to him for help, he knew what he could ask and what he couldn't do. Otherwise, he would be in deep trouble and unable to save himself. He knew more and had more dealings with the mercenaries. He had met Wan Shaochen more than once to discuss the future of Laos. This made him understand what the young man's idea was. The young man wanted to build a strong Laos. This strong Laos would not only have a strong reputation, but also allow the people here to live a rich life. In ancient times, the feudal dynasties were divided into ranks. Laos was also divided into ranks. To be specific, the Han people were the first, and the other foreign races were second, third, or even lower. Wan Shaochen wanted to lead all the people on the road to wealth, so that they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. Such an ambition was easy to say, but it was very difficult to achieve. Since ancient times, many people with great talents and great foresight had such a goal. However, no matter how hard they worked, there would always be people who didn't have enough to eat or wear warm clothes. It was obvious how difficult it was to achieve wealth together. Luan Xiaoqian had the intention to do this. In his words, as long as the people were willing to work hard and endure hardships, they wouldn't starve, especially since the potato was a high-yield crop and had been widely planted. If they were lazy, they would be sent to reform through labor. In any case, the people had to be hardworking, and in exchange, they would also become rich. The real people were naturally able to endure hardships. In the past, even if they endured hardships, they wouldn't necessarily have a good harvest. However, under Luan Xiaoqian's leadership, the lives of those who could endure hardships began to change. After all, Laos was going through a huge change, and there was a lot of work to be done. Even if he worked hard to build houses and roads, the remuneration he earned was enough to feed his family. Under Luan Xiaoqian's leadership, Laos was changing day by day. Following that, the young governor began to focus on the treatment and fairness of the people. With Yang Bao, who could complain about any injustice, there were fewer cases of people bullying others. The people could earn more money and live better lives. They could also gain more respect in terms of human rights. This was all brought about by Luan Xiaoqian. As the main representative of the natives of Laos, He Guang naturally saw all of this. This also allowed him to have a better understanding of Luan Xiaoqian's governing philosophy. Luan Xiaoqian was his direct superior, so how could he do his job well if he didn't figure it out? After understanding all of this, and hearing Nong Xi's story, he had a feeling that Luan Xiaoqian would do something about it. As he had said, they were now legal citizens of Laos, and had paid taxes. Now that there was a problem outside, how could the Laos government ignore it? Okay, I understand. I will find a chance to report it to the higher-ups. He Guang hesitated for a moment, but he didn't make any promises. After all, this matter involved the Kim Bian dynasty. Although the mercenaries were powerful, they had taken down Jiaoji and Lancang kingdoms. Now was the time to digest the fruits of their labor. Who knew if there would be more problems? Long Qi knew that He Guang's current position was a little awkward. With a new master, he had to worry too much about what he said. Long Qi didn't press him too much, and instead, he cupped his fist to express his gratitude. After staying for a while, he left the He mansion. Yunk was in Yang Qindong's mansion, discussing the next step. Since the plan had already started, there was no reason to stop. Chapter 601. Report. The Security Bureau just sent news that Long Qi went to the He family's residence and left after an hour. Tiger's Mane walked into the study and reported to Yang Qindong, who was looking at the sand table. Got it. Yang Qindong nodded and said, Pack up. We will head to Wulong City tomorrow morning. Not only was Tiger Edge stunned by this order, but even Skylark, who was analyzing the situation, was also stunned. Wulong City was a big city in Siam that was very close to Lao Province. It was less than 300 miles away from Wanxiang City. However, it was still within Siam's territory. Why did the sixth young master want to go there? The two of them could not figure out the meaning of this step. However, since it was the sixth young master's intention, they had to carry it out. Tiger's Mane nodded and left. Yun Ke, who was left behind, quickly looked at Wulong City on the sand table and fell into deep thought. He lowered his head for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Then, he suddenly shouted, I know. Sixth young master is preparing to, Shuh. Yang Chenong smiled at Yun Ke and nodded. That's right. I am preparing to go to war with Siam. As for the extent of the war, it depends on the attitude of the other party. The sixth young master. Isn't this too risky? After all, we don't have a lot of troops. If we do this, it will be equivalent to going to war on two fronts. Although Yun Ke believed in the strength of the mercenaries, he could not help but worry when he thought about how the enemy this time was much stronger than Jiaoji and Lancang Nation. This young master knows, but there will only be progress if there is a challenge. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring to always suppress others and beat the weak with strength? All right, this matter is only known to the few of us. Don't tell Xiao Chun. The young master is looking forward to seeing how he will perform in such a situation, Yang Qindong said with interest. Yun Ke saw all of this and he was very envious. What did Luan Xiaoqian do to deserve such attention from the sixth young master? Let's hope that he can have a perfect performance this time. Once he passes this test, his future will be limitless. Not only did he not let Luan Xiaoqun know that Yang Chendong secretly went to Wulong City, but Yang Chendong also did not show any interest in the matter of the Solingen family. He did not say that all of this was arranged by himself. He just wanted to see if the governor whom he had promoted had the ability to handle things. Although the other party was too young, the sixth young master's heart was still filled with hope. After a night of thinking, He Guang went to the provincial government early the next morning. He came to report to the governor, Luan Xiaoqun, about the results of the Laotian mercenary army and the problems in the province. As the governor, Luan Xiaoqun was not only in charge of the civil affairs, but also the military. This made him very busy, but also greatly increased his power. For example, if one were to take control of the military and government at the same time, it might cause problems in peacetime. However, in an unstable and dangerous place, such a method of centralizing power in one person was still necessary. At the very least, it would save a lot of unnecessary wrangling. Compared to 2 months ago, Luan Xiaoqun was thinner and more tanned, but he looked more energetic. After the attendant invited He Guang into the office, he held a piece of paper in his hand and asked 7 or 8 questions. This was one of the methods Yang Chendong used to train them. A good memory was not as good as a bad pen. When He Guang came, he was very clear about the situation of the army. Naturally, he answered all the questions without showing any panic. About an hour later, the questions were answered. Luan Xiaoqun nodded with satisfaction. General He, thank you for your hard work. Laotian is going to be a period of great development in Laotian. We absolutely cannot allow any chaos in public security. So, please don't relax and keep an eye on things. If you find any problems, solve them immediately. If you can't solve them, just report to me. Yes, Governor Luan, don't worry. I know what to do. He Guang's attitude was very humble. He did not dare to call himself a general in front of Luan Xiaoqun. After the work report, Luan Xiaoqun picked up the tea on the desk and took a sip. Subconsciously, she reminded He Guang that he could leave. Usually, at this time, the subordinates would immediately stand up and leave with the excuse that they still had work to do. However, this time, He Guang did not do so. Instead, he said tentatively, Governor Luan, I have something that I should report to you. What is it? Luan Xiaoqun was a straightforward person. He was too busy with work. If he was not too busy, he would not ask He Guang to leave immediately, because in a while, it would be time for the next person to report. It wouldn't be good to chat with others while drinking tea and delaying the main work. Since he had made up his mind, He Guang no longer hesitated. Instead, he used the simplest and most concise words to explain the matter that Long Qi had told him. After saying this, he immediately shut his mouth. He could pass on the message, but it was not up to him to make the final decision. He originally thought it was a military matter. He did not expect that the citizens involved were treated unfairly in other countries. This was the first time he encountered such a matter. For a moment, Luan Xiaoqun did not know how to deal with it. However, his intuition told him that it was not a small matter. Okay, I understand. How about this? I will go to General He's residence tonight. Haha, speaking of which, I have been here for more than 2 months, but I have been busy and did not visit your wife. It is very rude of me. When the time comes, I would like to ask General He to invite the people involved. I want to hear their words. Luan Xiaoli's face was full of smiles. When He Guang heard this, he was excited. Yes, then this general will be waiting for the governor's arrival tonight. What do you mean by not arriving? He said that he was just going to walk around casually. Don't make such a big commotion. Luan Xiaoqun was still smiling, but the reminder in his words was very obvious. That was, he wanted to keep the matter of him going to the He residence as low-key as possible. Don't let everyone know. He Guang immediately understood Luan Xiaoqun's meaning. The other party did not want to make a big commotion before making a decision. He immediately nodded. Yes, Governor Luan is right. We are just going to walk around in private. We will not disturb others. Very good. Then I will trouble General He to go and prepare. After He Guang left, Luan Xiaoqun intentionally stood up to send him off. This gave He Guang a fright. He quickly said, Governor Luan, please stay. However, the moment the door closed, He Guang's bent body immediately straightened. This was the first time the governor personally sent him off after he reported his work. Although it was just for show, it was already a big improvement. It proved that his actions had caught the other party's attention. This was definitely a good start. It seems that I did the right thing by reporting this matter. I'll go back now and bring Long Qi and that Tanongsi over. I'll tell them what they can say and what they can't say when they meet Governor Luan tonight. He Guang muttered to himself as he walked out of the building. In the office, Luan Shaoqian had already closed his eyes and leaned against the back of the chair. Early this morning, he received the decision of the 6th young master to go on patrol. Therefore, when such a problem arose, it was impossible for him to ask for advice. Thinking about what Beta Persei said in the letter, the 6th young master said that you should work as you should, as long as everything is reasonable and legal. If anything happens, he will take care of it. This was not as simple as just saying. Luan Shaoqian knew that since the 6th young master said it, he could really do it. Even so, if he asked for advice on everything, he would be too narrow-minded. It's just the Phnom Penh dynasty. Daring to touch the caravan of Lao province is tantamount to provoking the Lao provincial government. Even so, it is absolutely impossible for the other party to not give an explanation. Otherwise, if they attack the caravan this time, I am afraid they will attack us next time. After making a general decision in his heart, Luan Shaoqian opened his eyes again. At this time, there were footsteps outside the door. It was the next official to be received. He Mansion. Today, after He Guang came back, the He residents began to clean up. Then, his personal guards were sent out one by one to be responsible for the safety of the surrounding streets. In short, Governor Luan came to his residence to give him face. Then, he absolutely could not have any problems, not even the slightest bit. When the sky just turned dark, Long Qi and Nong Si appeared at the door of He Mansion. Sure enough, they were traveling light. Each of them had only brought a personal attendant with them. It was not as simple as what the messenger had said, that they did not cause any commotion. At this time, Nong Si was very excited. Even when he arrived at He Guang's mansion, he still felt like he was in the clouds. Originally, he thought that after forcing Long Qi, even if he would think of a way, there would not be a result so quickly. After all, this person had already retired from the position of state preceptor. Moreover, he was a minister of the previous dynasty. Seriously speaking, it was already good that he was not punished. But who would have thought that the other party really found General He Guang? What was even more unexpected was that the matter had already been reported to Governor Luan. Who was Governor Luan? Although he had the title of governor, there was no difference between him and the previous king of Lansong Kingdom, Piaci. Chapter 602. It was rumored that Governor Luan was very young and his future was limitless. If he could establish a good relationship with him, would the Sorangon family still have to worry about the future? He had asked around and found out that many big shots in Lansong wanted to meet Luan Shaoqian and have a meal with him. However, they had no way to do so. Now, he had done it. From the moment he received the news, he wanted to shout out to the entire Lansong nation. No, it should be said that everyone in Laos knew about it. However, considering that He Guang had told him to keep a low profile, he suppressed his excitement and followed Long Ping to the He residence. The moment he entered the He manor and saw He Guang, Nong Si had a very respectful look. To him, it was rare to be able to establish a good relationship with He Guang. All right, Governor Luan will be here soon. Whatever he asks, just answer. If you don't know, don't say anything. He Guang reminded with a dark face. Of course, these words were mainly directed at Nong Si. Long Qi had been a state teacher before and knew what to do better than him. Yes. Nong Si was an understanding person, so he kept nodding. All right, then we'll stand here and wait for Governor Luan to come. After He Guang finished speaking, he stood there in a very standard military posture, giving people the feeling that Governor Luan would appear in front of him at any time. Long Qi and Nong Si naturally didn't dare to say anything. They also stood behind He Guang and waited. Fortunately, this didn't last very long. In less than an hour, a soldier in armor ran over. Seeing this soldier appear, He Guang's face turned serious. He turned around and said softly, "He's here." Then he turned around and looked into the distance until a group of people slowly appeared. Luan Shaoqian also kept a low profile this time. Other than himself, there were only 6 Longfeng guards. After becoming the governor of a province, Yang Qindong gave him the standard of a squad of guards. However, he would not bring all of them with him. Usually, he would only bring 4 to 6 people with him when he took a break. Greetings, Governor Luan. Seeing that Luan Shaoqian was about to appear in front of his residence, He Guang had already stepped forward to welcome him with a fawning expression. His attitude was completely different from He Longqi and Nong Si's earlier attitude. General He, I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I had some business to deal with at the last minute, so I was delayed. Luan Shaoqian was very young and humble. Even when facing his subordinate, He Guang, he still had a humble expression on his face. This was hard to imagine. Feudal dynasties had a strict hierarchy system. Superiors were always indifferent to their subordinates. Even if they did something wrong, they would not admit it. Of course, the subordinates would not dare to pursue the matter. However, Luan Shaoqian came late and apologized, which greatly exceeded the expectations of Longqi and Nong Si. The two of them looked at each other at the same time, as if to say, could the person who came be Governor Luan? How could he apologize to a subordinate general? This didn't make sense. He Guang stood there. He was also frightened by Luan Shaoqian's attitude. Although the other party just said it casually, he still expressed his apology. This suddenly made him very nervous. Governor Luan, please don't say that. You are a superior. We should wait for you. Hey, you can't say that. The 6th young master said that all people are born equal. As long as everyone is willing to work hard, is willing to improve, and has a benevolent heart, then they will be respected. So, I came late and delayed your time. It's just an apology. It's nothing. It's something that should be done. Luan Shaoqian suddenly became serious, as if he was talking about something very important. He Guang also put away the charming smile on his face. Luan Shaoqian had mentioned the 6th young master, who was a godlike existence in the eyes of some people. Even He Guang had only seen Yang Qindong once when he entered the city. At that time, he was so scared that he didn't dare to raise his head. He only knew that the 6th young master was very powerful, very powerful. Now that even Governor Luan Shaoqian was so serious, he of course had to stop smiling. These words also reached Longqi and Nong Si's ears, and they couldn't help but tremble. Since Governor Luan Shaoqian said that all people were equal, didn't it mean that they had a chance? After all, they were also citizens of Laos. After a simple greeting at the door, He Guang quickly invited Luan Shaoqian into the house. This is the first time I'm visiting. I brought some gifts for sister-in-law. General He, please accept it. Luan Shaoqian said with a smile as he casually sized up the He residence. A long phone guard behind him then handed over a very exquisite box. This was the first cosmetics and perfume that were taken out of the imitation warehouse. After continuous development and self-processing in Qiming City, there was a new brand and packaging, Yang's Beautiful Beauty. Yang's Beautiful Beauty cosmetics had now become the best item in the eyes of upper-class women. Not only could it make women whiter and delay aging, there was also a set of 6 bottles of perfume that could make women exude different fragrances. The value of this set alone was more than 2,000 taels, and it belonged to the kind that had a price but no market. If it could be taken further away, even if the price was several times higher, it would still be a hot commodity. Thank you. This general thanks Governor Luan for his kindness. He Guang took the gift with a flattered look and carefully put it in the hands of the servant. He spread his right arm and said, Governor Luan, the banquet is ready, please. Let's go together. Luan Shaoqian still smiled and nodded, and under He Guang's lead, step by step, walked towards the banquet hall. Several people walked and chatted, and Longqi and He Nongxi were also introduced to Luan Shaoqian by He Guang. Mr. Long has made a great contribution to the liberation of Lao province. This is something that the world will not forget. Looking at Longqi, Luan Shaoqian said seriously, Thank you. Thank you for Governor Luan's recognition. Thank you. Longqi said with tears running down his face. Since the Lansang kingdom was destroyed and changed to Lao province, who knows how many people scolded him behind his back, saying that he was a traitor, unfilial, and so on. Although Longqi could shamelessly ignore all of this, he still found that many people alienated from him. There were even people who threatened that a disloyal person like Long Qi would not really believe him. The current Lao province was only because it wanted to stabilize, so it did not bring up the old debts. It would not be long before someone came to find trouble with him. What a joke. The mercenaries gave Long Qi 5 million taels of silver. That was a huge sum. How could he not take it back? It was only a matter of time. Look, Long Qi would not be able to jump around for long. When these words reached Long Qi's ears, he was already trembling with fear. It must be said that he had considered this problem before, and he had the same worries, but what could he do? Leave now? If he really did that, it would only speed up the mercenaries' pace of making a move on him. After thinking about it, Long Qi decided to stay quiet, and he even reduced the chances of him showing up. It was so that people could gradually forget about him. Just like when he partnered with the Solingen family to do business, he would not show up. Instead, he chose to make a fortune in silence. This time, if it wasn't for this problem, he would also not want to have any dealings with the mercenaries. Even if Luan Xiaoqin's power was monstrous, he did not want to see him if he could. Long Qi was not the only one with this idea. In the current Lao province, the mercenaries seemed to have gained a firm foothold, and they had gained the support of many people. However, the ones who truly supported them were the commoners who had benefited from them, as well as the Han people living in Lao province. Because of the arrival of the mercenaries, the commoners had their own fields, jobs to do, and money to earn. Their lives were much better than before. With the thought of not forgetting the person who dug the well when they drank water, they would naturally be grateful and support such a force. There was no need to mention the Han people. Ever since this place became Lao province, their status was extremely stable, regardless of whether it was in terms of treatment or the degree of respect they received. As Han citizens, they were given more farmland than the other races. Even if they were to work, their income would still be twice that of the other races. As Han citizens, they also enjoyed a high personal status. For example, when they walked on the streets, even the other races' officials would have to take the initiative to stop and let them pass first. This was something that the Han people had never enjoyed before. Furthermore, this was all brought to them by the mercenaries, so how could they not be grateful? However, they were the only ones who truly supported the mercenaries. As for the nobles and tycoons, they would only treat those who gave them more benefits. On the other hand, there was no need to talk about friendship. Only benefits were eternal. Long Qi also had such thoughts. He wanted to borrow the might of the mercenaries, but he did not want to get too close to them. This was the true thinking of people at his level. Right now, Luan Xiaoqin's words of, "Your contributions will not be forgotten by the world," made him feel as though he had found a soulmate. He then thought about how everyone was not optimistic about him and wanted to isolate him. However, the mercenaries, who used to be his enemy, were actually treating him so highly. Under such a comparison, he could not help but feel like crying. When Luan Xiaoqin saw Long Qi's expression, a smile appeared in his eyes. He knew that the other party was in a difficult situation and needed his help. There was no need for him to be courteous. As if he had just thought of something, he said, "Mr. Long, you were once a grand tutor. I'm sure you have a lot of connections. How about this? If you have the time, you can interact with some of the nobles and contact some of them to contribute to the development of Lao province. If you need any help, our provincial government is willing to back you up. How about that?" Chapter 603. This was an invitation. Long Qi was stunned at first, but before he could react, He Guang's elbow had already pressed against his waist. Although he didn't speak, the meaning was already very obvious. That is, there is such a good thing. You should quickly agree. Of course, this was a good thing. This meant that Luan Xiaoqin needed Long Qi to unite the hearts of the nobles. This was equivalent to working for the mercenaries. If anyone dared to disrespect Long Qi, it would not only be disrespecting Long Qi, but it would also be disrespecting the Lao's government and the mercenaries. The result would be obvious. In fact, Long Qi was not very old, just over 50 years old. He could still continue to shine. The most important thing was that he used to be the state preceptor here, so he was very familiar with the upper class. The matter of unifying the hearts of the nobles, in the eyes of an outsider like Luan Xiaoqin, may not be easy to do. It would take a lot of time just to investigate and understand some things. But it was not a problem for him. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was easy to do. Thinking that once he could become a representative of the mercenaries, who would dare not to give face to him, Long Chi's heart immediately became lively. At the moment, his old face flushed red, and he cupped his fist to Luan Xiaoli. "Thank you, Governor Luan. As long as my old bones are still here, I will do my best to do this matter." "Haha, good." Luan Xiaochen laughed and reached out to help Long Chi up. This was also an unexpected surprise. With Long Chi as the vanguard, many things will be much smoother. At least, he knew who could be friends and who could be enemies. It was okay to be generous to friends. But to enemies, there was only one word: kill. Kill until they were terrified. Kill until they were afraid. And if it still didn't work, then kill until they were all dead. Anyway, the lives of the foreigners were never the first. After greeting Long Chi, Luan Xiaochen's gaze fell on Nong Si again. The Sorangan family is a famous business family. This governor has also heard of it. You are very business-minded and capable. Your business channels are also perfect, which is admirable. I don't dare. Nong Si saw that Long Chi had already leaned over, and his face was already full of envy. But he knew that such a good thing had nothing to do with him. Not for anything else, just because they were businessmen. Businessmen could not be too political. Otherwise, if they wanted to do business in other countries to make money, they would be ostracized. That would be a great loss. Luan Xiaochen did not have the intention to rope him in. The development of Laos could not be done without businessmen. But that didn't mean that he couldn't live without a single merchant. Could it be that he, Butcher Zhang, would be able to eat a pig with hair if he left? As they spoke, they arrived at the banquet hall. Luan Xiaochen naturally sat at the head of the table. He Guang sat on the left, Long Chi sat on the right, and Nong Si sat on the opposite side. Wine and dishes were served, followed by a toast. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, everyone was almost done eating. Next, it was time to get down to business. Nong Si gave full play to his potential as a businessman. He told the story of Sorangan clan's encounter on the Mekong River as if it was a story. He didn't add anything, nor did he add any personal opinions. He knew that such a big event couldn't be exaggerated at all. Otherwise, it would easily backfire. Luan Xiaochen listened very carefully. Even when Nong Si finished talking, he did not express his opinion at the first moment. On the other hand, He Guang, who was sitting on the left, reprimanded General Hun Sen's behavior. It seemed that he did it deliberately. After all, he was now a mercenary. Of course, he had to stand on the right side. Hun Sen? What's his background and identity? Luan Xiaochen wanted to know more about the situation, so he looked at the 3 people. "Let me answer that," Long Chi said. He had always wanted to perform well. As a former state preceptor, he was very familiar with the situation of the surrounding countries. It was not an exaggeration to say that he knew everything. From Long Chi, Luan Xiaochen learned more about Hun. Senator Hun Sen was one of the important military representatives of the Golden Bian dynasty. His position in the army was second only to General Dayan. Although they were both generals, Hun Sen and Dun were quite different. General Dayan would treat his soldiers with sincerity. Unless it was necessary, he would not be too cruel to his soldiers. If possible, he would try his best to give his soldiers some opportunities to improve themselves. Hun Sen was different. This person was ruthless and extremely greedy. He even dared to embezzle the pay of his soldiers, which caused many people to be dissatisfied with him. However, this person was very good to those who were stronger than him. He would give gifts during festivals, which made him a good impression in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Golden Bian Kingdom. Even King Boromir had a good impression of him. It could be said that he was a typical example of flattering the superior and bullying the inferior. There were too many people who had received benefits from him, so it was difficult to touch him. After Long Chi introduced the situation one by one, he finally added some of his own thoughts. As far as this old man knows, although this person is ruthless, he is still very discerning when doing things. He is very clear about who can be offended and who can't be offended. This time, he suddenly attacked the Sorangan family, which is different from his usual behavior. It is really unreasonable. What Long Chi meant was that the Sorangan family was a part of Lao province and had a good relationship with Dayan in the Golden Bian Kingdom. Logically speaking, Hun Sen should not have any thoughts of attacking them. Could it be that he was blinded by greed and dared to rob money for money? Long Qi could not be blamed for having such thoughts. This matter was not done by Hun Senator, it was done by Yunk with Yang Qindong's consent. The reason why Hun San was chosen was that this person was very greedy and was very famous. If he was not the scapegoat, who else could it be? Of course, Wan Shaoqian would not delve into the reason. He only knew that the citizens and merchants of Lao province had been persecuted. As the governor of the province, he had to seek justice. Otherwise, an official who only knew how to be unruly in his own home would not be respected. After seriously understanding the matter, Wan Shaoqian's eyes fell on Nong Si, wanting to hear his opinion. Nong Si knew that it was time for him to express his opinion, so he told Long Qi his plan. Governor Wan, I have arranged for someone to go to the Golden Bian Kingdom and ask Hun Sen to return the stolen money. I also sent someone to plead with General Dun, hoping that he can put some pressure on Hun Sr. That's it? Wan Shaoqian looked at Nong Si for a long time and realized that Nong Si had finished speaking. He looked at him with some dissatisfaction. Yes, that's it. Nong Si nodded with a puzzled face. He thought to himself, isn't it enough? It's already good enough to recover the lost money. As for the people who were killed, they can only blame themselves for their bad luck. That's not enough. Wan Shaoqian shook his head decisively, then looked at Nong Si and said, Patriarch, since you have come to me, it means that you have found the Lao provincial government. If this matter is so simple, it is tantamount to blasphemy against the provincial government. Do you understand? Nong Si just wanted to recover the lost money and reopen the trade with the Golden Bian Kingdom. He didn't think so much. Looking at Nong Si's shocked face, Wan Shaoqian shook his head. Businessmen are businessmen, after all. They only see the benefits in their eyes. How can they see the big picture? It seems that I need to remind him. Patriarch, now I'm giving you two choices. First, pretend that you didn't report this matter to the provincial government and we didn't receive your request. You can deal with it yourself. Whether you suffer a loss or gain, it's your family's business. Second, report this matter to the provincial government and ask them to hand over the murderer, compensate for the loss, and make a public apology and guarantee that this kind of thing won't happen again. As for whether they will agree or not, we will communicate with them. If they are really arrogant and don't put the citizens and businessmen of Lao in their eyes, then we will have to teach them a lesson. Teach them a lesson? He Guang heard it clearly. Governor Luan, do you mean to send troops? I don't rule out that possibility. Wan Shaoqian didn't hesitate and said directly. Hiss. Whether it was He Guang, Long Qi, or Nong Si, when they heard that Wan Shaoqian didn't rule out the possibility of sending troops, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. It's just losing some money and some people. These losses are the Sorangan family's own business. They didn't pay more taxes to the Lao government, but because of this, Wan Shaoqian didn't hesitate to send troops. This result is really unexpected, and they didn't even think about it before. At this moment, the way the three looked at Wan Shaoqian changed. Although this person is still young, he seems to be covered with a layer of halo that makes people look up to him. Okay, Patriarch, you can make a choice. What I can say is that no matter what choice you make, I will respect you. But please remember, if you don't want to make a big deal out of this, then all the consequences of this matter will be borne by your family. If you encounter unfair things in the future, don't think that we will stand up for you. In other words, there is only one chance, understand? Of course, Wan Shaoqian had his own reasons for saying this. Lao had just been established, and there were too many things to be done. It was not the right time to start a war. It would be best if they could avoid it. However, if the Sorangan family were to request the government, it would be a different story. If they were to ignore the request, it would be a disheartening blow to the hearts of the people, which would be detrimental to the establishment of a united Lao province. Chapter 604. For the sake of the people, for a better and more united Laos, even if the time was not right, he dared to fight. Because he believed in the sixth young master and the mercenary army. As for giving Nong Si only one chance to choose, it was because a government could not be controlled by businessmen. Today you want to do this, tomorrow you want to do something else. Do you think the government is run by you alone? Now, He had to make a decision to stop this kind of thing from happening again. Luan Xiaoqian stated the conditions, and it was Nong Si's turn to think about it. This was a serious matter, and it might even involve the mercenary army. He had to be careful. Luan Xiaoqian did not intend to urge him. Instead, he chatted with He Guang and Long Qi about the rich families in Laos. The casual conversation also allowed him to know more about the country, especially about some of the hidden nobles. He got first-hand information about what kind of people they were and what they liked. As for Nong Si, his forehead was covered with layers of cold sweat. He really couldn't make this decision. He wanted to ask if he could go back and think about it, but he thought about Luan Xiaoqian's identity. This time, he took the initiative to ask for help. How could he be given time to think about it? However, if he really sent the army for a few 100,000 taels of silver, it would be a bit of a joke. But if he did not ask Luan Xiaoqian, would Hun Sen let him go? He had already robbed him once, and he had already offended him. He was afraid that there would not be a second time. Increase the protection of the caravan? What a joke. That was Hun Sen's territory. Even if he hired more people, how could he be a match for Hun Sen? Not to mention that hiring one more person would cost more money, which was not in line with the rules of businessmen to save money. In other words, if he did not ask for help from the Laos government, he was afraid that the Sarangans would not be able to trade with the Phnom Penh dynasty in the future. Not only would he lose a big customer, but he might also cause Luan Xiaoqian's dissatisfaction. What? You came to ask me for help, but after I gave you an idea, you became timid. What do you think the Laos government is? On the other hand, if things got out of hand, the business of the Golden Rim dynasty might really be abandoned. But it wasn't that there weren't any benefits. On the contrary, there would be great benefits. After this incident, the Salangan family would become famous. In the future, wherever their caravan went, who would dare to provoke them? Wouldn't they be afraid of the mercenary army? In the long run, enduring the pain for a while seemed to be a good thing. After all, he, Nong Si, was still young and had some guts. In addition, if he couldn't solve this problem, he would have to give up the position of patriarch. This was something he was unwilling to accept. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one choice left. How is it? Has the clan leader made his decision? Luan Xiaoqian could wait, but he couldn't wait endlessly. There were so many things for him to deal with. Every minute was precious to him. Knowing that he had to make a decision, Nong Si's eyes flashed with determination. Okay, I'll listen to Governor Luan's orders. He Guang and Long Qi weren't surprised that Nong Si would be so tactful. If he hadn't made such a choice, they would have been suspicious and cut off all ties with him. After all, in a place like Lao Province, disobeying Luan Xiaoqian wouldn't lead to anything good. Okay, Luan Xiaoqian patted the table to show that he was a little excited. That's it. Don't stop what the Salangan family has been doing. Once the Golden Rim dynasty gives a result that is not satisfactory, you report it to Yang Pao. After everyone knows about it through the World Knowledge Tea House, it's time for our government to step in. Luan Xiaoqian didn't intend to directly put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty. He even used the excuse of sending troops. At this stage, the main focus of the provincial government was still on economic development. If he really did this, it was inevitable that he would encounter some opposition. Although with his identity and relationship with Yang Chendong, he could make his words carry weight. After all, they were all working together. It was better not to fall out with him if it was possible. If this matter was reported to Yang Bao and the whole world knew about it, then even if it was for the sake of dignity and face, they could only fight. Only the people in the government would not say anything else. Only when the people's hearts were united could they do great things. Luan Xiaoqian made a plan according to his thoughts. After an hour, he left He Mansion in a low-key manner. Unless he had arranged a spy here before, otherwise, he would not know that Governor Luan had visited He's mansion at night. When Yang Chendong received the information from the Security Bureau that Luan Xiaoqian had visited He Mansion at night and met with Long Qi and Nong Si secretly, the corners of his mouth curled up. No, Governor Luan knows when to advance and when to retreat. It's good that he knows to keep a low profile before things are settled. But if that's the case, I think we have to speed up our actions. Looking at the vast, dense forest in front of him, he issued a military order. Speed up the march and gather at the designated place. The capital of the Golden Rim dynasty was Golden Rim City. The people sent by the Solingans finally arrived. They found General Dagon and asked him to put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty. At the same time, they found General Hun Sen to express their dissatisfaction and their intention to ask for the silver back. Hun Sen was naturally confused. Why did he have to give the silver back to them? Moreover, it was more than 100,000 taels. Did they think he was easy to bully? They could find any reason to bully him. The other party was just a businessman from Laos. He couldn't represent the Laos government, let alone the mercenaries. Why should he be afraid of such a person? As a result, he was kicked out before he could even see General Hun Sen's face. The soldiers also threatened that if he dared to make trouble again, it wouldn't be as simple as kicking him out next time. At least a part of his body would be left behind. The people from the Solingans who found General Dagon didn't have a good ending. General Dagon had only received some benefits from them. Why would he fall out with another general with real power for such a small benefit? Choosing the lesser of two evils, Dagon's approach wasn't wrong. But what he did was equivalent to cutting off all hope for the Solingans. The people who were sent out returned to Wanxiang City and reported the result to the Patriarch, Nong Si. If it was before, Nong Si would have been heartbroken and helpless when he heard the result. But now, he knew that Governor Luan would take action. He naturally had confidence in his heart. He immediately ordered people to find the arranged reporters and let them report to Yang Pao about the tragedy of the Solingans caravan in Shangding City of the Golden Rim dynasty. It was also known as the Mekong River tragedy. The next day, the Yang family published the Mekong River tragedy in the newspaper. The news spread through the World Knowledge Tea House and soon caused a great sensation. The injustice suffered by the Solingans in the Golden Rim dynasty had been spread throughout the upper class of Laos. This was naturally because of Long Qi. During this period of time, under the banner of Luan Shaoqian, he secretly met with many nobles of the Lansong kingdom. While deepening his friendship with them, he also reached a lot of consensus. This was not only because Long Qi, as the state preceptor, was good at talking with people. There was also a more important reason. All the nobles knew that there was no hope of reviving the country. Even their king, Piaci, was said to have been sent to the sea and put under house arrest. Without a leader, they were like a pile of loose sand. It was too difficult for them to make any progress. They were defeated one by Long Qi using various means. It was one thing for Long Qi to say it, but it was another thing for it to be published in Yang Pao. This would make it known to everyone. It was even tantamount to forcing the government to make a statement. Could it be that the young Governor Luan was ready to put pressure on the Golden Rim dynasty and was even prepared to go to war? When the nobles were still guessing how much trouble this matter would cause, the news spread to the people and really caused a lot of anger. Many people were very unhappy with the behavior of the Golden Rim dynasty. With the help of some people, there were already many people who thought that the Golden Rim dynasty should give an explanation for this matter. If they still did not bow down, then they would not hesitate to go to war. For this reason, many young people said that once the war started, they were willing to sign up for the army and do their best to protect the dignity of Laos. There was a motive, a reason, and even a momentum was created. On the third day, Luan Shaoqian, who had been secretly paying attention to this matter, finally expressed his opinion at a meeting of the provincial government. He had every reason to suspect that the injustice suffered by the Sorangan family was caused by the Phnom Penh dynasty. Their ultimate target was Laos, which was still under construction and development. As the governor of Laos, he said that he liked peace and loved peace. However, if anyone dared to trample on the dignity of Laos, then he would not hesitate to go to war. Even if he had to pay the price, he would seek justice and an explanation. He even reserved the right to send troops to seek justice. Luan Shaoqian's words naturally caught the staff of the provincial government off guard. This was an economic development meeting. How could they talk about war? Wasn't this off topic? However, anyone who had seen Yang Pao in the past 3 days knew that Governor Luan was also forced. After all, the people under his rule had been treated unfairly. If they did not make a statement and did not give an explanation, then who would believe them? As a result, although Luan Shaoqian suddenly made a statement, there was no one who stood up to stop him at the meeting. This was because not only did they doubt Luan Shaoqian's ability, but also the vast majority of the people of Laos. In the face of such a powerful force, who would stand up to stop him? Chapter 605. The meeting went on smoothly. After that, Yuan Shaoqian sent a messenger to the Phnom Penh dynasty to demand an explanation. The speed of the response fully reflected the high efficiency of the government. For this reason, Yang Bao also specially added an explanation, and this news also made many people rejoice. From this matter, they also saw that they had a powerful backer behind them. If they could win this war, or force the Phnom Penh dynasty to bow their heads, no matter where they went in the future, they would be able to hold their heads high and not be afraid of being targeted. The messenger was very fast. He left the city at noon and rushed all the way. After 7 days, he arrived in Phnom Penh city. He took out a document and said that he wanted to see the king of the Phnom Penh dynasty. The officials of the Ministry of Rites were responsible for receiving the messenger from Laos. When they learned the purpose of the messenger, these officials were shocked. They were shocked that a caravan was killed. How could the Laos government be so agitated? Could it be that one of the people who was killed was a high-ranking official in the provincial government? Faced with the firm attitude of the messenger, the receptionist did not dare to be careless. He quickly reported the matter. In the end, the document asking for compensation and an apology was sent to King Boromir's desk. When Boromir saw this document, he felt a sense of confusion. But then, he was furious. He immediately ordered someone to find General Hun Senator. He wanted to ask if the matter was true. If it was true, General Hun Sen was too bold. Due to the mercenary army's strength and combat power, it took half a year to conquer Jiaoji and Lansong respectively, forcing the surrounding countries to take the initiative to form an alliance. For example, the Phnom Penh dynasty was now an ally of Siam and the Awol dynasty. Although they were allies, it did not mean that they were willing to compete with the mercenary army. At least, none of the 3 countries were willing to take the initiative to provoke the mercenary army and become their first target. Perhaps in the final battle, the 3 countries would win, but the first country to be defeated would definitely be the most miserable. Even if they won, they would not get any benefits. Therefore, the 3 countries put their hopes on other countries. They hoped that other countries would fight with the mercenary army to the death first, so that they could reap the benefits. However, this definitely didn't mean that his country would be the first country to fight to the death with the mercenaries. Hun Sen was urgently called to the palace. As soon as he saw Hun Sen, he was scolded by the king. Hun Sen didn't know what he had done recently to incur the king's anger. When Bo Guoma was tired of scolding, he threw the document at Hun Sen's feet. He looked at Hun Sen with an expression that said, "Look at what you've done." Hun Sen picked up the document with trepidation. When he saw what was written on it, he immediately regained his confidence. He was greedy for money and had done many things that crossed the line, but the Salangan family's caravan was definitely not under his command. So at this moment, he strongly refuted and even cursed to prove his innocence. Hun Sen raised his head and looked as though he had been greatly wronged. When Boromir saw this, he started to doubt the authenticity of this matter. After all, there was no reason for Hun Sen to lie in front of him. If he did, he would find a way to make up for it. You really didn't do this? Although Boromir was 70% convinced, he couldn't help but ask with certainty. Absolutely not. If I did, I'm willing to be burned to ashes after my death, Hun Sen said fiercely. Of course, he was full of confidence. Ever since the Salangans sent people over, he had deliberately called a few of his confidants over. In the end, he confirmed that these people didn't do anything. Everything was a misunderstanding. Now that someone was using this matter as an excuse, of course he wasn't afraid. If you didn't do it, why did the Salangans insist that you did it? They even sent a document from Laos because of this. Could it be that they are deliberately putting the blame on us so that they can use the army against us? Boromir's eyes kept darting around as he considered all kinds of possibilities. That must be it. They want to use the army against us. Your Majesty, the mercenaries are very ambitious. This is the reason they are looking for. We have to be careful. Hun Sen immediately agreed after hearing what Boromir said. So that's the case. How can they bully us like this? Why are they looking for us? What should we do? Why don't General Hun? Boromir was halfway through his sentence when he shook his head. Now that he had formed an alliance with Siam and the Awad dynasty, if he showed any intention of backing out, it would mean that he had voluntarily withdrawn from the alliance. If that happened, if the mercenaries really chose him as their next target, without an ally, how could he resist them? It seemed that it was impossible to back down. However, if he insisted on being stubborn, he didn't want to be attacked by the mercenaries. He couldn't make a decision at the moment. He looked at Hun San, who was still waiting for his orders, and waved his hand. You can leave now. By the way, when people ask you about this matter, don't say anything. Don't admit or deny it. Let's see how it goes. Oh, Hun Sen responded intentionally. It seemed that this matter had something to do with him. However, since the king had such an attitude, what else could he do other than agree? Before Boromir could come up with a solution, he kept delaying the matter. When the messenger from Laos failed to meet him 3 times, he left angrily. Before he left, he even said in a domineering tone that if he still couldn't get a satisfactory answer when he returned to Laos, he would send an army instead of an emissary to Laos. The messenger left. Based on what he said before he left, there wasn't much time left for the Phnom Penh dynasty. There were only 7 days left. If they couldn't make a decision, it seemed like a war was imminent. When he heard that a war was about to break out, Boromir was really afraid. The military strength of the Phnom Penh dynasty was only average. In terms of territory, it was smaller than Laos. Once a fight broke out, what would he use to defend against the mercenary army? He couldn't win the war. If he couldn't win, he would have to bow down. If he bowed down, the mercenaries would have no reason to send an army. Although it would be humiliating and might even cause dissatisfaction with his allies, what other choice did he have? Just when Boromir was hesitating, and he was even inclined to admit defeat, the messengers from Siam and the Awal dynasty suddenly appeared. They all expressed their approval of the Phnom Penh dynasty's initiative to attack Laos. At the same time, they also stated that if Laos wanted to harm the Phnom Penh dynasty, they wouldn't sit idly by. They would take the initiative to send troops to help. After all, they were allies. With the support of his allies, Boromir's confidence increased a little. However, he still couldn't make a decision. But it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. He didn't know how, but this matter was spread all over the country. Immediately, a large number of citizens stood up and expressed that they would not lower their heads for the sake of the country's dignity. At this critical moment, they were willing to fight for the country. Following the pleas of the people, more and more nobles and rich gentry stood up. They expressed that they would not bow down to the unreasonable accusations of Lao province. For this reason, they were willing to pay a large amount of military expenditure to support the king. The people's matter was easy to deal with. As long as the public opinion was good, the kind and ignorant people could be easily manipulated and led. But why did the nobles stand up as well? Boromir was very puzzled. He immediately sent someone to investigate. Soon, the results reached his ears. It turned out that the nobles did this for the sake of their own interests. They said that it was for the sake of their interests because the envoys of Siam and Ava contacted them in private. They said that as long as Laos was defeated and occupied, the nobles would get a lot of benefits. They had no choice because there were too many precedents. Whether it was in Vietnam or Laos, many of the nobles' fields had been divided and their houses occupied. Once the mercenaries occupied Phnom Penh dynasty, the nobles would be forced to a dead end. This was indeed the case. In the spirit of giving land to the rich was the fastest way to get closer to the people and gain their support. This was done in both Vietnam and Laos. Many rich gentry went bankrupt because of this, and some of them even had their properties confiscated because of this, and their entire family was taken away to reform through labor. However, not all nobles were targeted like this. For example, some nobles who were doing legitimate business or inherited their titles and relied on their salaries. Because they didn't have a lot of land and didn't do anything evil, they still maintained their strength intact. But no one knew that if these people were not targeted now, they would not be targeted in the future. What if the mercenaries were to gain a foothold? Would they do something to them? No one could say for sure. This scared the nobles of Phnom Penh dynasty. In addition, some people instigated them, so they all stood up. Instead of being at the mercy of others, they might as well fight. What if they defeated the mercenaries? Then, not only would they be fine, but there would also be a lot of benefits to be gained. It was clear that everyone knew what they should do in this situation. As a result, these people jumped out and decided to take a gamble. If it was only the support of the people, Boromir was not worried. He was the ruler here. As long as he gave the order, with the help of the army, it would be easy to suppress some people. However, with the participation of these nobles, it was completely different. These people's forces were complicated. If things went wrong, even his throne would be in danger. These people were not to be offended. In other words, his rise to the throne was inseparable from the support of these people. Chapter 606. With the support of the people, the support of the allies of the two countries, and the pressure of the nobles, Boromir had no other choice. He made up his mind to not lower his head and began to mobilize the army. While asking for military funds from the nobles, he also began to recruit soldiers from the people. There was no such thing as an airtight secret, not to mention that the Goldenbean dynasty had no intention of hiding their actions. Just as the emissary returned to Wanxiang City, new news came. The Goldenbean dynasty had begun to prepare for war and had recruited 100,000 soldiers from the people. In addition to his original army, the number of soldiers reached 400,000. When the number of enemies was reported to Wan Shaoqian, he was shocked. His first reaction was to ask his subordinate, the sixth young master, where was he? When he found out that the sixth young master had returned to Wanxiang City and was in the original Lansong Palace, Wan Shaoqian put down everything in his hands and rushed to the palace. Now that things had gotten out of hand, he could not hold it in anymore. He urgently needed the support of the sixth young master. Yang Qindong returned to Wanxiang City the night before yesterday. As the saying goes, leaving the city without a sound, returning without a sound. He returned after arranging everything. After being busy for a while, he came back and had a good sleep. When he woke up, Yang Qindong began to stroll around the palace. As he walked around, he clicked his tongue and sighed. These bastards really know how to enjoy life. The country isn't very big, and there are still many people who can't afford to eat. Their palaces are bigger and more luxurious than the other. How many people's hard-earned money is this? Young master, the palace in Crimson City is better than here. Hearing Yang Qindong sigh, Tiger's Mane thought that the sixth young master was mentally unbalanced and wanted to comfort him. I know. Yang Qindong nodded, then looked at Tiger's Mane as if he was looking at an idiot. This immediately attracted Beta Persei's laughter from the other side. Knowing that he was being laughed at by Beta Persei and seen as an idiot by the sixth young master, Tiger's Mane was a little unconvinced. He wanted to explain, but Yang Qindong spoke first. The young master thought that it would be a waste to have such a big palace here. Why don't we make good use of it? Why is there no one living here? The young master can live here. In the future, he will have a palace in every province he goes to. How great would that be? Tiger's Mane seemed to be dissatisfied with the contempt and took the initiative to speak. What? In your eyes, the young master is a person who likes to be extravagant and wasteful? After rolling his eyes again, Yang Qindong did not give Tiger's Mane a chance to speak. Instead, he said as if he had made some kind of decision, I think we can move the business street to the palace. This way, not only will the business area be bigger, but doing business in the palace will also attract more curious people. That way, we can earn more money, right? If they really did business in the palace, they could really attract more merchants. Think about it. Because of the difference in levels, although merchants were rich, their social status was not high. Most of them did not have the opportunity to enter the palace. If there really was such an opportunity, there would definitely be merchants who had not established business relations with the Yang family who would want to take a look. As long as they came, with the variety of products and novelty of the Yang family's business, there was no need to worry that those people would not take out money to buy the goods. Wouldn't that increase the speed of earning money? In terms of earning money, the trading company of the Outer Skies was not inferior to the fighting strength of the mercenaries, especially the novelty of the products and the variety of products. No matter where they were, these products would be crazily fought over. However, Yang Qindong was still not satisfied. There were too many things that needed to be spent on the Yangtze. For example, high salaries. Currently, the officials of Vietnam and Laos were receiving high salaries, which were even higher than the tax revenue of these two provinces. If they wanted to reach the same level, they would need to develop for a period of time. And if they wanted to achieve the goal of earning money, they would have to wait for a few more years. In addition, the basic construction of the two provinces, such as building roads and houses, used reinforced concrete, which was the toughest and most useful material. The investment required was astronomical. This was Yang Chendong. If it was someone else, they would only be able to dream about it and would not be able to use it in reality. Although the development of Crimson City was going well and it already had a strong ability to earn money, every time a ship was shipped, it was equivalent to countless gold and silver being thrown into one's pocket. However, just relying on the ability to produce blood here was not good for long-term development. Moreover, the military factories, power plants, shipyards, and so on were also extremely costly. Sometimes, in order to succeed in a research project, one would have to fork out an unimaginable amount of money. Yang Chendong did not want to place all the pressure on Chisin City. He wanted the businesses in Vietnam and Laos to become more developed and larger. Only then would they be able to produce enough hematopoietic products and sell their own products. However, the scale of the business street was still too small. The number of merchants it could receive was limited, and the amount of goods it could store was also limited. Therefore, he set his sights on the uninhabited palace. Governor Luan is here. Beta Persei's sharp eyes had already seen Luan Shaoqian approaching from afar and reminded him in a low voice. Haha, little Governor Luan is here. Yang Chendong returned to reality from his contemplation and turned around to laugh. The title of Little Governor Luan was first called by Yang Chendong, so Tiger's Mane and the others often called him that in private. Because of habit, sometimes when they met in person, they would still call him that. This caused Luan Shaoqian to be dissatisfied, but he could not say anything. After all, this was Yang Chendong's love for him. Adding the word little in front of the governor's name, would it really not affect his prestige? The sixth young master. Although he was displeased with the word little in his heart, he did not dare to show the slightest dissatisfaction in front of Yang Chendong. He even knew in his heart that adding the word little meant that Yang Chendong treated him as one of his own. If you don't believe me, go and look at the others. Who else had the word little in front of their official title? He should be happy that he was the only one who received this honor. Come, you came at the right time. Yang Chendong stretched out his hand and pulled Luan Shaoqian's arm, then pointed to the palace in front of him and said, What do you think about making this place into a place where business is concentrated? Here? Luan Shaoqian was also shocked by Yang Chendong's words. He instinctively wanted to say the same thing as Tiger's Mane. This was the place where the sixth young master came to rest. It was equivalent to the emperor's side palace. Was he really willing to use it for business? Yes, it's here. Yang Chendong did not care what Luan Shaoqian thought. Instead, he said to himself, Usually, no one lives here. Instead, we have to arrange for people to guard and clean here. It's simply too wasteful. If he could take it out and make good use of it, wouldn't he be able to use it to attract more merchants to come here? Don't you think this is a good idea? Of course, it's a good idea, Luan Shaoqian said with certainty in his heart. As the situation in Laos became more and more stable, more and more businessmen came to get goods. He was worried that the original business street was a little too small, but if he wanted to expand, he would need to invest a lot of money, which made him a little distressed. If the palace could be used, not only would it solve the problem of investment, it could also expand the commercial street, store more goods, satisfy the needs of more people, earn more money, and get more business tax. No matter how one looked at it, it was a good thing. Although he thought so in his heart, Luan Shaoqian still asked a question. If this place is changed into a business district, where will the sixth young master live here in the future? Just leave a side palace. The area of this palace is too large. I can't live alone. Yang Chendong answered casually. Obviously, he had just thought about this problem and made a decision. That's also possible. Luan Shaoqian nodded. He could only say that it was possible. He could not say that it would definitely work or not. This was where he was smart. The palace was equivalent to Yang Chendong's private property. He could decide how to deal with it. Other people did not have such power, even if he might be Yang Chendong's brother-in-law in the future. Otherwise, if other people knew that he was the one who wanted to use the palace, and then the sixth young master agreed, Who knew if it would cause some bootlickers to be unhappy? It was even possible to cause a group of people to attack him because of this. As the territory controlled by Yang Chendong grew larger and larger, and as the strength of the mercenaries continued to expand, no one thought that the sixth young master would be limited to being a loyal duke. Not to mention a duke, it was very normal for him to be called a king and an emperor in the future. Anything related to the sixth young master was not a trivial matter, and there would be more and more rules in the future. Now that he wanted to use his private property, it was inevitable that he would be punished in the future. Luan Shaoqian was very careful, and it could even be said that he had a long-term vision. In the eyes of Yang Chendong, he just laughed. He liked subordinates who did things with a sense of propriety. Such people could be entrusted with important tasks and have greater prospects in the future. Well, since you don't object, it's settled. In the future, not only the royal palace here, but also the royal palace in Yunnan province, as long as the other occupied royal palaces can be classified as commercial use. In this way, we can save some time and financial resources to build a commercial street. Ha ha ha. Yang Chendong was happy with his idea. At the same time, the words "you don't object" also removed Luan Shaoqian from this matter. If you don't object, it was enough to show that this matter was led by Yang Chendong alone, and it had nothing to do with other people. If there were any problems in the future, naturally, they would not be able to find other people. Yang Chendong's words revealed another piece of information, and that was that he would occupy other palaces in the future. This also shocked Luan Shaoqian, and he took the opportunity to tell the person in charge of Yang Chendong. The sixth young master, there are some problems now, and it started with a business family called Solingen. Chapter 607. Luan Shaoqian didn't know that Yang Chendong had already known about the development of this matter from the beginning to the end, and it was even planned by Yang Chendong. He was just fulfilling his duty as a governor and reported the matter truthfully. Yang Chendong did not intend to interrupt Luan Shaoqian. Instead, he listened to the report very carefully. From time to time, he would frown and nod. After a while, when Luan Shaoqian finally finished, especially when Luan Shaoqian mentioned that the Golden Bian dynasty had begun to gather troops and recruit new troops, Yang Chendong could not help but say, "They are just courting death." He did have such qualifications to say such things. In the eyes of others, the Golden Border dynasty was a great existence. Even in the eyes of the great Ming dynasty, because it was too far away, it was quite out of reach. However, in Yang Chendong's view, it was completely different. The Golden Border dynasty bordered Vietnam, Laos, and Siam respectively. Just like the filling of a bun, it was tightly surrounded by the dough. If it was really aimed at him, Yang Chendong could start from several places. How could he put such a Golden Border dynasty in his eyes? Luan Shaoqian was also excited by Yang Chendong's words. Yes, the Golden Border dynasty's move is no different from looking for death, but the problem is that now the three small countries of Phnom Penh, Siam, and Ava have formed an alliance. No matter which of them is attacked, the other two countries will immediately follow. Although the mercenary is strong, it is still difficult to fight against three. You're right. But let me ask you, is the Sorangan family a citizen of Laos? Yang Chendong asked. Of course. In this regard, Luan Shaoqian gave the answer without hesitation. Well, if they are citizens of Laos, then they are bullied. As the masters, how can we just sit back and do nothing? This will not only lose the hearts of the people, but it will also make others think that we are easy to bully. This must never happen. So if anyone provokes us, there is only one word: beat them. Beat them until they feel pain. Beat them until they are afraid. Beat them until they are obedient in the future. If we don't even have this bit of courage, then what's the difference between us and other small countries? Remember, the strength of a country doesn't depend on how much territory you have or how much resources you have. It depends on whether your citizens have their own status and whether they can gain the respect of others. Do you understand? This was equivalent to Yang Chendong giving Luan Shaoqian a lesson. The latter listened attentively, and in the end, his eyes lit up. Sixth young master, I understand. Well, if you understand, then do what you should do. Let me, the young master, finish the war in the Golden Bian dynasty. Yang Chendong said confidently. To others, this war was a little sudden, but to him, he had been preparing for it for 4 months, and everything that needed to be arranged had been arranged. Luan Shaoqian left with a happy face. Since the sixth young master said that he would be in charge of the war, he only needed to do the logistics work well. Of course, the economic development of Laos could not be stopped. On the contrary, the huge Lansong Palace could be used, and he could use more goods to launch a larger economic trade. After Luan Shaoqian returned to the provincial government, he did not mention anything about the war. Instead, he announced the decision to move the commercial street to the palace and increase the economic trade development. As soon as the news came out, everyone who heard it was shocked and confused. What happened? Could it be that the mercenaries were afraid of the Golden Bian dynasty? Then they wanted to use the increased economic trade share to attract everyone's attention. It made sense. Although the mercenaries had the most advanced firearms, their foundation was too weak. Plus, they had just conquered Vietnam and Laos, so they should be weak. Even in the face of the Golden Bian dynasty's provocation, they had to suppress it first. When the Patriarch of Solingen heard the news, he immediately panicked. What did this mean? Did Governor Luan shrink back? He had created enough public opinion, and now many business families were waiting to see the result. If things were to end like this, it would be very awkward for the party involved. Not only would the family's business reach be unable to reach the Golden Bian dynasty, but the other countries would also vigorously attack them. After all, this matter seemed to be caused by them first. It was just a business family. If they suffered a loss in a foreign country, they could just admit it, and then use more money and more sincerity to build relationships. But they still wanted to kidnap the mercenaries and the Laos government and use administrative pressure to solve everything. If they succeeded, others would look up to them, and it would be normal for them to give the green light. But now the Laos government did not care about them. Without their backing, the Solingen family would naturally be hated by everyone. Nong Si's face was full of panic. This was not only because he could no longer be the patriarch, but also because the entire Solingen family was about to collapse under the heavy pressure. If that really happened, he would become the sinner of the family and be engraved on the list of shame forever. Nong Si could not sit still and wait for death. He got on the carriage and went straight to the Long residence. He wanted to ask Long Xian about it. In fact, with his status, he could not get in touch with any of the higher-ups in Laos. The only person he could get in touch with was his family's business partner. Long Chi was also shocked by the sudden news from the provincial government. Previously, Luan Shaoqian had solemnly vowed that as long as they exposed the matter and made it known to everyone, the provincial government would not sit by and do nothing. But now, the wind had suddenly changed. What was going on? What happened in the middle of it all? By the time Nong Si arrived at the Long residence, Long Chi had already sent someone to the He residence. He wanted to see if he could meet with General He Guang. If he could see General He Guang, it meant that things were not too bad. Otherwise, things would be troublesome. Recently, he had been using the provincial government's name to contact the nobles in Laos, and he had seen some results. But if he were to be abandoned this time, then all his previous efforts would be for naught. Long Chi himself would also become the object of everyone's disdain. He was afraid that in the future, other than staying obediently in the mansion, he would not be able to do anything else, and no one would be willing to believe in him. Don't worry, don't worry. Long Chi saw Nong Si in front of him, sweating profusely. He comforted him, and at the same time, he was comforting himself. I think Governor Luan is a responsible person. He won't abandon us like this. But he's still too young. Young people are always impulsive. Nong Si said in disbelief. I've already sent someone to see General He Guang. Let's see if he's willing to see us first. Long Chi was also affected by this sentence, but at this moment, he could only hold on to a glimmer of hope and hope that good news would come. After what seemed like 2 hours, it felt like a year had passed. Finally, the person he sent out came back with a message from He Guang. Don't panic. Everything is under control. Just wait and see the results. This was the message from He Guang. Although Long Chi could not understand it, when he learned that the person he sent not only entered the He residence, but also met with General He Guang, he felt relieved. Since He Guang was willing to see his people, it meant that things were not that bad, and there was still hope. No matter how Long Chi comforted himself, many people had already begun to laugh at him. Suddenly, the pressure increased. Whether it was Long Chi or the Solingen family, they were now in a deep crisis. The envoys who had been keeping an eye on the Lao government, especially the governor, Luan Shaoqian, were secretly celebrating. In view of Luan Shaoqian's strong statement, they were all ready to fight with the mercenaries. But who would have thought that it was all bark and no bite? It seemed that things were not going to end well. This inevitably made some people sigh that the mercenaries were just so. After 5 days, the influence became worse and worse. The nobles who stayed in Lao province also began to increase their communication. From time to time, they would spread rumors that they were not optimistic about the future of Lao province. These nobles no longer had any power, but over the years, they had spread their influence deep into various industries. These nobles were not very good at accomplishing things, but they were very good at causing trouble. Under their influence, the volume of goods sold in the commercial street was greatly affected. The problem that the merchants had to consider now was the safety of the goods that had entered the Yang family's hands after leaving Laos. Although no one could deny that the Yang family's products were unique and of high quality, and they didn't have to worry about not being able to sell their products. What if they were robbed like the Suolangan family? The matter with the Sorangan family was too big. If it was not properly solved, the safety of all the merchants would not be guaranteed. The Phnom Penh dynasty was fine after they robbed the silver. Would the other small countries and regions follow suit? For the first time, there was a backlog of goods. The official in charge of this matter went to see Luan Shaoqian and suggested whether Chichen City could suspend the shipment or reduce the amount of goods. Otherwise, there would be problems if there were too many goods, especially when some of the goods still had a shelf life. If they were not sold in time, it would be a big loss. Luan Shaoqian did not seem to hear the suggestion of the official. Not only that, he also sent people to Chichen City in the name of the governor to rush the goods. This was the confidence that Yang Chendong gave him. In the face of Luan Shaoqian's actions, many officials expressed their puzzlement. Some of the more straightforward people began to write to Chichen City, asking whether Luan Shaoqian was capable of being the governor of Lao province. Chapter 608. The situation in Lao province began to change. The criticism of Governor Luan Shaoqian was getting louder by the day. Yang Chendong, who recommended Luan Shaoqian, did not say anything at this time, which made many officials puzzled. They even went to the palace in groups of 3 to 5 to meet the 6th young master and express their opinions. But no one was approved. In fact, Yang Chendong was no longer in Wanxiang City, let alone Lao province. How could he meet his subordinates? No one knew that the 6th young master had appeared in front of Shangding City, which was beside the Mekong River. Since things started here, let's start our attack from here. Yang Chendong sighed and looked at Shangding City, which was 5 miles away. He raised his arm gently and then put it down. Beside him, countless Longfeng and auxiliary soldiers rushed toward Shangding City. Everything happened without warning. At noon, many soldiers of the Golden Bian dynasty were still basking in the sun on the tower. Suddenly, they saw the army green approaching from afar. Their brains short-circuited at the first moment and then came up with an impossible idea. Enemy attack. No one knew who shouted first. Then, chaos broke out on the city gate tower. The soldiers began to look for bows and arrows and other long-range weapons. Shangding City, which had been peaceful for many years, was suddenly facing a ferocious beast. It was completely unprepared. Before the Longfeng arrived, it was already in chaos. Close the city gate and send someone to Jujing City to ask for help. The centurion guarding the city shouted loudly. When he realized that no one listened to him, he simply went downstairs, found a fast horse, and rushed out of the city gate on the other side. The centurion's idea was simple. 300 miles behind him, there was a 100,000 army led by General Hun Sen in Jujing City. As long as he sent the message there, it would be a great achievement. It was still the same old saying. The idea was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Just as the centurion rode out of the city and felt the wind whistling past his ears, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest and fell to the ground with a plop. Due to the inertia, the centurion was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, he was no longer breathing. It turned out that he had been shot in the chest. Since he had suddenly appeared and prepared for such a long time, How could Yang Chendong let the news leak out? When he gave the order to attack, all 4 gates of Shangding City were filled with mercenaries. Before the battle even started, Shangding City was already a dead city. The North City Gate was the main attack, while the other 3 city gates were the main defense. Anyone who rushed out, whether they were dignitaries, soldiers, or ordinary people, was greeted with whistling bullets. With a long spear in hand, who in the world could be his match? With strong fighting spirit and confidence, the mercenaries rushed into Shangding City from the North City Gate without encountering any decent resistance. Then there was a burst of intensive gunfire, and the massacre began. All the people of the Golden Rim dynasty who were still running around on the streets, no matter what their identities were suffering the wrath of the mercenaries. Gunshots came one after another. After only half an hour, the pungent smell of blood floated in the air and did not dissipate for a long time. The street was already full of corpses and rivers of blood, but the mercenaries still had no intention of stopping. Unless they stayed in their homes and did not go out, as long as they went out on the street, they would face a merciless massacre. The mercenaries had never done such a thing before, but this time they took advantage of the massacre of the Sorangan family on the Mekong River to launch a bloody revenge. The mercenaries wanted to use facts to tell the world and warn everyone how terrible it was to be their enemy and how wrong it was to do so. The massacre lasted for 4 hours, and there was no one left on the street. They stopped and took a breath. The next work was done by the 20,000 Laotian mercenaries. They began to push the doors open one by one. They did not kill anyone, but just called out the surviving people and let them see the bloody scene while cleaning the battlefield. Almost all the Sarangs who were rushed out of their homes were pale and then vomited. This scene would be imprinted in their minds, and they would never forget it. Clean up the battlefield, gather the valuable things, and arrange a team of 1,000 to drive the carriages back to Laos. Then drive all the people out of Shangding City, rest for the night, and set off for Jigging City tomorrow morning. Yang Chendong gave several orders in succession. He did not kill all the Phnom Penh people, but deliberately let a group of people go. He believed that these people would become the best mouthpieces. He believed that it would not take long for this bloody scene to spread throughout the Phnom Penh dynasty. He wanted to completely intimidate his opponents before the war began. He wanted to make their morale plummet and at the same time, make them feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. In this way, when the 2 armies met, it would be easier for them to win the war. Jigging City. It was one of the big cities at the north gate of the Sorangan dynasty. It was another big gate after Shangding City. At this moment, the city was full of soldiers. Not only in the city, but also outside the city, there were barracks. One after another, there seemed to be no end to it. Hun Sen's 100,000 troops were stationed here. According to the plan, Hun Sen was the vanguard to rush to Shangding City as soon as possible, then go up north along the Mekong River and directly attack Bansa City in Laos. However, the sudden news from Laos made Hun Sen hesitate. He did not forget King Boromir's advice before he came. This was the time to show his strength. It would be best if they did not have to fight the mercenaries. After all, when facing the powerful mercenaries, they had no advantage except for the number of troops. Now that an accident had occurred, Laos acted as if nothing had happened. Under such circumstances, if Hun Sen still took the initiative to attack the enemy's territory, it would not be defending the country, but provoking the enemy. This was tantamount to forcing the mercenaries to fight with them. This was definitely not what the king wanted to see. So Hun Sen stationed his army in Jigging City without asking for permission and biding his time. He only sent someone back to Golden Rim City to ask for the king's orders. Hun Sen originally thought that as the vanguard, he would have to fight the mercenaries to the death, even at the cost of his own life. Unexpectedly, the mercenaries were scared, which made the 100,000 troops happy. During the time they were stationed, all the soldiers drank and ate meat every day. Anyway, the military budget was more than enough this time. Most of it was provided by the nobles, so it would be a waste not to eat and drink. They celebrated as if they had won the battle. Even Hun Sen did not say anything when he heard about it. He had been under a lot of pressure before, and now that the pressure was gone, it was time for the soldiers to relax. Because of this, Hun Sen gained the support of most of the soldiers, which made his popularity soar in a short time. He was almost on par with the first general, Dagon. Hun San was still immersed in his vanity, but he did not know that danger was approaching. The 2nd and 3rd regiments of the 1st Division of the Cold Front had arrived outside Jigging City and were ready to launch a fierce attack. After marching for 2 days, they had covered 300 miles under their feet. Then they rested for an afternoon. When it was dark, the regiments, battalions, and companies began to slowly encircle the 100,000 vanguard troops of the Golden Rim dynasty according to their previous orders. The sky was dark, but the camp of the Golden Rim dynasty was as bright as day. Numerous bonfires were set up, and mutton was hanging on each wooden rack. Under the roasting fire, there was a crackling sound, and the aroma spread far and wide. As the vanguard general, Hun San sat on a temporary wooden mat, with good wine in front of him and beautiful women beside him. He drank one cup after another and laughed heartily. It was true that one should enjoy life to the fullest, and not let the golden cup be empty to the moon. Beside Hun Sen, there were some captains and kiliarchs. They used wooden mats to form a large circle. In the circle, 2 skilled soldiers were sparring with each other. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 weak soldiers in a strong army who were afraid of death. Similarly, in a weak brigade, there were also warriors with good skills. The 2 soldiers who were competing were the best in the Phnom Penh army. They each displayed what they had learned, and the wonderful performance of their fists on flesh attracted a burst of applause from other soldiers. Haha, good. You're worthy of being the best in our vanguard. Come, reward them. Hun San was affected by the fierce fight between the 2 soldiers and shouted loudly. Then the soldiers beside him took the silver and gave it to the 2 warriors who were performing. The 2 warriors who got the silver quickly retreated and were replaced by others. Even if there were benefits, everyone should share them. The exciting fight here attracted even more soldiers to watch and cheer spontaneously. The aroma of the meat and the lively performance in front of the tent not only attracted the attention of most soldiers, but also many soldiers who were in charge of guarding the perimeter sneaked over. They did not think that this was a violation of military discipline because they had heard that Laos was scared. They seemed to be afraid of the army of the Golden Rim dynasty, and they were deep in the country. How could the enemy appear here? Almost every soldier had the same idea. The army camp was chaotic, and military discipline was useless. This was the army camp of 100,000 soldiers. The night wind was still blowing. A danger that could decide their life and death was slowly approaching. However, not a single one of the 100,000 people was alarmed. They were still drinking, eating, chatting, and talking about things that interested them. Chapter 609. Young Master, these enemies are too weak. Our vanguard is 500 meters away from them, but they still haven't discovered us. Tiger's mane put down the night vision telescope in his hand, shook his head, and seemed to be singing a lament for the enemy. An army without a sense of crisis will never be strong. Come on, send out the signal for the general attack. Yang Qindong's eyes flashed. The enemy's carelessness determined their next result. This was the so-called, you reap what you sow. Beta Persei, who had been waiting for a long time, turned around and shouted, let's start the general attack. Yang Er, who had a loud voice to begin with, let out a roar that sounded like the angry roar of the heavens. In an instant, his voice traveled several hundred meters. The second guard team was part-time artillery. After hearing the order, they immediately put the prepared shells into the barrel. Then, the 100mm mortar roared. After flashes of blazing fire flashed in the sky, it fell on the unprepared vanguard camp of the Golden Bien dynasty. Boom, boom. There was no need to aim at any coordinates at all. Any cannonball that fell down would produce an earth-shaking sound. After every cannonball fell, there would be heart-wrenching screams and screams. Hong San, who was still tasting wine and looking at the beauty in his arms from time to time, suddenly felt the ground trembling, as if an earth dragon was about to turn over. Before he could figure out what was going on, huge flames appeared in his sight. He instantly lost his hearing, and his mind stopped working at this moment. The only thing left was the scene of him opening his mouth and not making a sound. Kill! The mercenaries, who had already been in place, began to madly rush in from 4 directions. As they continued to move forward, bullets with fire were shot out from the barrel like a dense rain. With the help of the still-burning bonfire, one could see the Golden Bien Dynasty soldiers falling to the ground one after another. This was a massacre without any suspense. From the very beginning of the war, the situation had been one-sided. Yang Chendong had carefully prepared for the war in Laos for nearly 4 months. With the overwhelming advantage of advanced firearms, the enemy's will to fight had crumbled in less than 15 minutes. The entire camp was filled with soldiers begging to surrender. War was such a miraculous thing. One could win against many with a few, defeat the strong with a weak force, and extinguish the flames of war that should have burned for a long time in an instant. In today's battle, at least 2 of the 3 aspects mentioned above were perfectly reflected. In a situation where their military strength was far inferior to the enemy's, due to their meticulous preparations and unparalleled pressure, the enemy was defeated without even putting up a decent resistance. One by one, they knelt on the ground, no longer as arrogant and insufferably arrogant as before. Originally, they thought that this battle would last until dawn or even longer. After all, there were 100,000 enemies here. Even if there were 100,000 pigs, it would be a laborious task to catch all of them. However, humans were often worse than pigs. At least pigs instinctively knew how to run when they saw danger, but humans would not because they had intelligence and brains and knew how to avoid danger. When they saw that there was no way to escape, they chose to surrender. Perhaps for some people, surrendering was shameful, but for the defeated soldiers, it was a very effective way to save their lives. In just over 4 hours, just after midnight, the 100,000 enemy soldiers were completely under the control of the mercenaries. They were all tied up with long ropes that had been prepared beforehand. Then, they were tied together like gourds. Their heads were lowered, and they looked like children who had done something wrong. Reporting to the 6th young master, the enemy camp has been controlled. More than 90,000 of them have been captured, 4,000 of them have been killed, and 5,000 have escaped. 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Pai walked in front of Yang Chendong and reported the results of the battle after a salute. Not seeing Wu Sheng report, Yang Chendong thought that he was injured and asked with concern, "Where is Regiment Commander Wu?" Reporting to the 6th young master, Regiment Commander Wu led the 1st Battalion to chase after the enemy. 3rd Regiment Political Commissar and 2nd Battalion Commander Chun Bo reported after Luo Pai. Chase after the enemy? They didn't catch Hun Sin? Yang Chendong's reaction was extremely fast. He immediately thought of a conclusion. Only when the enemy's main commander was escaping could Wu Sheng abandon his troops and choose to chase after him.
Yes.
This time, it was 2nd Regiment Commander Luo Pai who stood up to answer the question. At the beginning of the battle, the situation was too chaotic and some of the enemies escaped. I didn't expect Hun San to be among them. 6th young master, we ask for your forgiveness. 3rd Regiment also asks for forgiveness. Since Wu Sheng wasn't around, Political Commissar Chen Bo spoke on his behalf. What are you guilty of? Yang Chendong glared at them. You all have performed very well. It's normal for some of the enemies to escape in the chaos. We have limited manpower and can't defend against them. Besides, didn't Regiment Commander Wu chase after them? Maybe there will be some good news. Just as Yang Chendong finished speaking, a warhorse rushed over from afar. Then, he heard Wu Sheng's cursing voice. Damn it, your fighting ability is mediocre, but your escaping ability is top-notch. Fine, there's no need to guess. They must have failed to catch him. Sure enough, when Wu Sheng passed through the 1st and 2nd line of defense and arrived in front of Yang Chendong, he saluted with a black face. 6th young master, your humble servant is incompetent. We didn't catch Hun Sin? Did he really escape? Yang Chendong couldn't help but sigh. A vanguard general couldn't be underestimated. Otherwise, why didn't they catch 90,000 captives? Yes, he escaped. I chased after him with the 1st Battalion and killed more than 300 enemies. We also captured some captives, including Hun Sin soldiers. They confirmed that he had escaped. Wu Sheng reported in a depressed tone. Then, Wu Sheng straightened his body. 6th young master, your humble servant requests to continue the chase with the 1st Battalion. No matter what, we have to kill this enemy general who looked down on us. Wu Sheng wasn't just saying. Before the battle, He had made a bet with the 2nd Regiment commander, Luo Pur, to see who could catch Hun's senator. He had never expected that it would end up like this. Well, there's no need to chase him. Besides, he can't run away. It won't be long before we kill our way into Phnom Penh City. At that time, we'll see how he can escape. As for now, immediately arrange for someone to send the captives back to Laos. There will be people there to meet you. Haha, 90,000 captives, and they're all strong laborers. I think Yu Qian will be very happy to receive them. Yang Chendong laughed. According to the intelligence, the entire Phnom Penh dynasty only had 400,000 soldiers, including 100,000 new soldiers. In one battle, they had destroyed a quarter of the enemy's forces. No matter how one looked at it, it was a great victory. Presumably, when the news spread out, many people would be blinded. The Battle of Jujing was equivalent to a blow to the Phnom Penh dynasty. It proved that the mercenary regime was sacred and inviolable, but at the same time, it exposed their position. Obviously, it was not realistic to launch a sneak attack next. But even so, Yang Chendong and the mercenaries were still very confident in their abilities. Wasn't the reason why they trained as if their lives depended on it? Wasn't it so that they could perform better on the battlefield? Hun Sen escaped. Relying on the fact that his mount was of a better breed, he ran very fast. He only dismounted when the warhorse started foaming at the mouth. At this time, he could already see the walls of the next city, Chuanlong. The mercenaries suddenly appeared in the country and defeated the 100,000 vanguard led by Hun Sen in Jujing. The captives were more than 90,000. After Hun Sen personally confirmed the news, the Chuanlong City Guard sent the news to the capital, Phnom Penh City. Along with the news, there was also the fact that Shandong City was breached and 30,000 civilians were slaughtered. This was all spread by the people who were deliberately released by the mercenaries. There was absolutely no question about its reliability. The two news spread one after another in the territory of the Phnom Penh dynasty, causing waves of panic among the people. The mercenaries were too powerful. In just a few days, they had conquered 2 cities, killed more than 100,000 people, and captured more than 100,000 people. Could the country's army defeat such an opponent? In Phnom Penh City, when the news arrived, it was not only the people who were panicking, but also some dignitaries. They knew that the mercenaries were very powerful. After all, this had been proven by the facts. Because of this, they took out their wealth to support the country's army, hoping that they could win the war with a generous reward. But now, reality had given them a big slap in the face. Everyone was silent at the same time. They also had doubts in their hearts. Was it right for them to support their country to go to war with the mercenaries? In the palace, the moment King Boromir received the news of the war, he sat there without moving for a long time, as if he had been petrified. When he came back to his senses, he cursed. First, he scolded the mercenaries for not playing by the rules. They were clearly trying to keep the peace and were about to admit defeat. However, they suddenly sent out troops and caught them off guard with a sneak attack. Then, he scolded Hun Sen for his stupidity and incompetence. Hun Sen's 100,000 troops were completely defeated in less than 4 hours. How was he a vanguard general? He was clearly an idiot. When he thought about how this was caused by this person, he was even more furious. He could not wait to skin this person and pull out his tendons to relieve the hatred in his heart. He had cursed, but the situation would not change because of his curses. What to do next was ultimately up to him, the king. General Dagon, I will give you 150,000 soldiers to guard Chuanlong City. No matter what, you cannot let the mercenaries take a step forward. I will immediately send people to Siam and the Awad dynasty to ask for help. Since we are allies, they can't just stand by and watch us get beaten. Chapter 6:10. The alliance had become his last hope, and Boromov hoped that they would be willing to fight to the death and send troops to Laos. As long as they made a move, the mercenaries would be attacked from both sides. The mercenaries were likely to retreat. Then, it would be time for him to recover what he had lost and restore the prestige of the country. He quickly arranged for people to get reinforcements. Then, he fixed his eyes on Chuanlongqing. Not only King Boromir, but many people in the entire Golden Border dynasty had their eyes on Chuanlongqing. They wanted to see the result of the clash between the two armies. Would it be beneficial or disadvantageous? Laos. The news of the victory in the Battle of Jigging City had finally spread. At first, it was just some gossip. There was no confirmation, but it had already shocked many nobles. Didn't they say that the mercenaries would not make a move? Didn't they admit defeat? Why did the battle start so soon? Before that, they did not receive any news at all. There was no lack of smart people among the nobles. They quickly remembered that the 20,000 Laotian mercenaries were transferred to the south. At that time, it was said that it was to eliminate bandits and to prevent the Golden Border Dynasty's army from pressing on the border. Now, it seemed that it was just an excuse. They were probably already on the battlefield at that time. The nobles had bribed many Laotian mercenaries. After all, these people were born here. They had too many concerns and too many shortcomings. However, it was obvious that these people were also kept in the dark. They did not know their mission until the moment before the battle. At that time, because of the tight lockdown, they could not send back the news. So, what did this mean? Did the mercenaries know that they would interfere and were already on guard? Or was it all because of military needs? If it was the latter, of course, it did not matter. It was understandable that the army needed to lock down the news. However, if it was the former, would the nobles be dissatisfied with their interference in the mercenaries' affairs? Would they even be the next target of punishment? These nobles were originally people who had lost their power. They had inherited too many things from their ancestors. In fact, they were already in dire straits. If the mercenaries stepped on them at this time, how could they resist? While these people were in a state of panic, the news that the mercenaries had conquered Shangding and Jujing, killing tens of thousands of enemies and capturing 90,000 enemies, was reported to the Yang dynasty. For a time, all the Tianxia inns in the various cities were overcrowded. Many commoners squeezed into these inns to drink the free tea and listen to the literate people talk about the news over and over again. Their faces were filled with excitement and excitement. Under the influence of Yang Bao's public opinion, more and more people learned about the policies of Lao Province. As Lao Province's infrastructure was on the right track, more and more people had jobs and money to earn. Through the distribution of land to the rich, more and more people were able to live on land that belonged to them. As long as the people had land in their hands, they would feel at ease and satisfied. Although the Lao provincial government had only been established for a few months, it had already received the sincere support of many of the people. This time, when they learned that the mercenaries who were guarding the fruits of their victory had won a great victory, almost everyone was happy. If they won the war, it meant that the benefits in their hands would not be taken away at will. In front of a bright future, the Lan Tsang kingdom could go to hell. In the past, this kingdom had not treated the people well. If they were allowed to kill their way back, wouldn't they return to the days when they did not have enough food to eat and clothes to keep warm? The people were the most direct in their actions. They did not care about right or wrong, good or bad. They only knew that if someone was good to them, they would be good to that person. Now that the Lao province's policies were on their side, naturally, they would side with the Lao province. In addition, there were the educated youths among them who were spreading the news every day. There were also the Han people who had gained more benefits from the war. Thus, the opinions of the people were surprisingly unified. In the afternoon when the news was published, at least 7,000 young people had signed up to join the army. They were using their actions to support the Lao provincial government. As the provincial governor, Wan Shaoqian was very touched by the actions of the people. However, as a sub-province, there were strict regulations on the number of soldiers they could have. This was to prevent other provinces from secretly expanding. Thus, in the face of the enthusiasm of the people, Wan Shaoqian personally received them at the square in front of the government building. He expressed his gratitude and stated that there was no shortage of people in the mercenary army. He also asked them to return first. If there was a need to recruit soldiers, Yang Baozhong would report it. As for the youths who did not want to join the army on a whim, he suggested that they sign up first to learn some basic military knowledge. If there was a need for soldiers, those with experience would naturally be given priority. After much persuasion, they finally managed to persuade more than 7,000 people to go back. This scene quickly spread throughout the entire Wanxiang city, causing many people to be shocked. In just a few short months, the Lao provincial government had already won the hearts of the people? It seemed like even the Lansong kingdom's most glorious period could not achieve this. With Luan Shaochen holding the fort and meticulous preparations, the provincial government was operating as usual. Other than continuously sending various war preparations to the front lines, they were fully focused on developing their businesses and infrastructure. Just like Crimson City, they were developing day by day. With the victory at the front lines, the nobles did not dare to make any sarcastic remarks and became much more obedient. The goods that were originally overstocked were also quickly sold out when the news of the victory at the front lines spread. Since the mercenary army had expressed their determination to protect the merchant group, what else did they have to worry about? Even if they could not sell their goods to Phnom Penh, Siam, and Ava. But weren't there other countries and regions around them? Just Great Ming alone was a huge market, and it was enough for them to mess around. The merchants began to move. Every time they brought in goods, they would have to pay more tax. The money from the sale of goods could not be intercepted in Lao province, and all of it had to be handed over to Chien City after the transaction. However, the tax did belong to them, and they could use it to develop their businesses. Money made the world go round. The development of Lao province entered a faster track. However, in this era of rapid development, there was a sudden movement in Lankai City, which was south of Wanxiang City. The Siam Kingdom had sent out 200,000 soldiers and was about to attack the city. As the war progressed, the days passed, and Siam and Ava finally started to make their moves. This was especially so for Siam, whose territory was adjacent to Wanxiang City, where the Lao province government was located. When they received King Boromir's request for help, the higher-ups made the decision to send troops to Wanxiang City. King Ili Chi of Siam was a person with foresight. When Jiaoji was still around and sent troops to South Ming, his attention was already on this place. If not for the fact that he had to cross Lansong and Jiaoji to enter Great Ming, he would have already thought of sending troops to seize the resources of Great Ming. What happened next was beyond Ili Chi's expectations. Suddenly, a mercenary army appeared and defeated the seemingly strong Jiaoji. Then, the mercenary army took over Lansong and changed its name to Lao Province. This series of actions immediately made him feel nervous. Ili Chi was worried about the powerful military strength of the mercenary army. He was worried that they would use this opportunity to attack him. In all honesty, if he had such a powerful army, he would definitely not be soft-hearted. He would definitely raise his butcher's knife and slash down on the people and regions that he felt deserved it. He believed that he was not the only one who felt this way. The mercenary army would also feel the same way. Originally, he was thinking of how to fight his way out of this chaotic world, expand his territory, and create a great empire. However, the unexpected rise of the mercenary army forced him to give up on this idea. Instead, he thought of how to protect himself. This was the reason why Siam, Phnom Penh, and Ava formed an alliance. In other words, they felt the danger and huddled together to protect themselves. They were confident that with the alliance of the three countries, they would have considerable strength. Although it was not enough to destroy the mercenary army, it would at least make them feel pressured. What was unexpected was that not long after the alliance was formed, the Sorangan family incident occurred. While Ili Chi was scolding General Hun San for his stupidity, he was also paying close attention to the development of the situation. Fortunately, some news came not long after. The mercenary army suddenly stopped mentioning this matter, as if they had admitted defeat. However, why was his heart still unable to calm down? The facts proved that Ili Chi's intuition was right. On the surface, the mercenary army seemed to have admitted defeat. However, they had been gathering their forces secretly and launched an unexpected and swift attack. Not only did they occupy two big cities, but they also directly destroyed the 100,000 troops of the Phnom Penh dynasty. This weakened the strength of the enemy and showed the invincible and powerful side of the mercenary army. Ili Chi admired their actions, but at the same time, the pressure increased greatly. Today, the mercenary army was targeting the Phnom Penh dynasty. Would they target Siam tomorrow? Instead of letting the mercenary army approach step by step, it was better for them to take the initiative to attack, especially when the mercenary army was confronting the Phnom Penh army. If they suddenly attacked, their chances of winning would be much higher. Once they captured Wanxiang City, Not only would they be able to obtain the wealth and various resources in the city, but it would also be tantamount to seizing the mercenary army's escape route. This would greatly relieve the pressure on the Phnom Penh dynasty. As for whether this would lead to the retaliation of the mercenary army, what a joke. They were already enemies. Was there a need to be afraid of such things happening? Siam's unannounced attack caused a wave of panic in Wanxiang City. The nobles who had become obedient began to move again. Some of them even began to secretly contact the special envoy sent by Siam. They seemed to have decided to side with the other party. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.